All right, Brent and Joe, I believe I have everybody moved over, but please let me know if I missed anyone.
It looks like you have everybody, Dylan.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. Tonight we have Director Liu and her staff with CDOT to provide us an update to the I-270 corridor improvement project. As you know, this is a very important project for Commerce City. This is a project that we contributed $1 million to move forward the NEPA and the pre-construction activities. So for now, I'll turn it over to Director Liu and her staff and have them make their presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, and I think we have a slide presentation, which I believe someone's driving.
Yes, I'll pull that up and just let me know whenever you want me to move forward to the next slide.
Perfect. All right, it's up. Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for having our team here to talk for a few minutes about the state of play on the 270 corridor improvements. I think first and foremost, I would just thank you all for your participation already in sort of helping us think through the early stages of this project. I think over the past month or two, we've had some really substantive discussions with many of the folks around the virtual table this evening, including a pretty big conversation about how to treat the Vasquez project relative to the 270 project. You all had made an ask of us to align these projects and look at them together so that we'll be having one conversation about the two projects, one of which goes right through your community and the other, the interstate itself. And we thought that was a good idea. So what you'll hear from us is sort of the process for 270, which we're calling 270, but we're really using this as an opportunity to talk about Vasquez as well, and to make sure that we're thinking through how the different pieces of this infrastructure connect to one another and connect to Commerce City. Next slide, please. All right, so first thing, I'm pleased that we were able to have so many members of the state team here today, and I want to just take a moment for everyone who's part of this presentation to introduce themselves, in part so that you know who you're working with and have the kind of context on whom to call with different issues about the project and as we go through this. So first, I'm Shoshana Liu. I'm the Executive Director of CDOT. There are three other CDOT folks who are part of the presentation today. Jessica, you want to introduce yourself?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. I'm Jessica Mickelbust. I'm the CDOT Region 1 Deputy Director of Program Delivery, which is essentially the engineering unit. And I'm also leading and facilitating the environmental assessment as part of this project team.
Great. Adam.
Yes, good evening. My name is Adam Parks. I'm a resident engineer at the CDOT Region 1 North program and the project manager for this I-270 corridor improvements project.
So Adam is the guy who's going to keep us all in line on this project. Julie.
Good evening, Council. I'm Julie George. I'm the Region 1 local government liaison. So I am here as a resource for you on this project or anything CDOT. So if you just ever have questions, you're not sure who to go to, I'm your person.
All right. And we are fortunate also to have John Putnam from CDPHE here, who I know is presenting to you later on another topic as well. John?
Good evening, City Council. John Putnam, I'm the Director of Environmental Programs at CDPHE, and excited that CDOT pulled us in early to start addressing environmental justice, air quality, contamination, and other sort of issues early, and has a really strong approach to engagement that we'll talk about this evening.
Great, thanks. So next slide, please. All right, so, kind of the big picture of where we are today. I suspect nobody on this call needs to be told why 270 and fixing it is important. And, at that, we would just thank you for the tremendous partnership that you've already showed, particularly in the investment that you've made in accelerating the review. We know that that's a big deal, and it means a lot to us to have all of you as such active participants in the project. You know, this corridor is one of the highest priorities for CDOT right now. You know, in terms of the priority capital projects that we included for use of Senate Bill 267 funds, you know, this is really front and center. And, you know, while we're kind of in a COVID world where we've had to adjust, you know, we've really tried hard to keep the planning for this project on schedule because, you know, we know just how important it is to all of you. You know, so first kind of addressing the big picture, you know, we've gone through a worst case scenario planning exercise at CDOT the last few months in light of the COVID crisis to try and sort of plan for the worst case scenario with dollars that we may have, then for how to sort of build back above that. This project is not funded in the current COP, Certificate of Participation dollars that CDOT has right now, but you know we have every expectation of completing the plans and building this project in a timely manner. And you know, in subsequent discussions over the next few months, we can advance our conversation about the different pathways for paying for it. But you know, I think the bottom line is we see this as sort of there are big capital projects that are ongoing right now, like the Central 70 project. This is kind of the next class of big projects. We are deliberately looking at the timing of this to sort of wind up as Central 70 is winding down, in part because we want to limit the cumulative amount of construction that's happening in the general vicinity at the same time. So it's very deliberate that we are getting this project ready to go so that as we sort of get to the final stages of Central 70, this one can wrap up. Next slide, please. Adam, you want to take us through this one?
Absolutely. So this is a good graphical representation of the traffic congestion in the corridor. This is just a day in the summer a couple years ago where we took a snapshot of speeds, and you can see down the center, that is the entire 6-mile length of the corridor compressed onto this page, starting with I-25 at the bottom, looking down to I-70 at the top, however you want to visualize that. And this shows throughout the day speeds by location. So in the westbound direction on the left side of the screen, during that day in particular, congestion started around 5 a.m. and continued past 5 p.m. Red is those speeds under 20 mile an hour where you often have stop and go traffic. That's particularly troublesome for trucks, which take quite a bit of extra time to get up from a stop back to speed. And then in the eastbound direction, right-hand side of the page, you can see eastbound was slightly better after the York interchange. It loosens up a little, but you might be curious what COVID, what the shutdown of the economy did to this roadway. This is one of the first roads in the metro to resume its old patterns of congestion, and it continues to be the worst in the state. In fact, it's the first freeway in the state to experience daily stop and go pattern, and it really has resumed its old ways once again now that enough businesses have opened back up. There's really just a high amount of trucks and industrial activity in the area, which really have been depending on this roadway for a long time, and it's really barely getting by. So.
Next slide, please. And you know, to Adam's point, the fact that even in the economy as it is right now, we're seeing this corridor have that kind of congestion and activity, I think just reinforces why it so badly needs to be at the top of the list. You know, we're very aware of the freight patterns that we're seeing right now, and that in some ways we're even more dependent on freight than we ever were in the midst of this crisis. And you know, I think we're seeing some of that come to a head on our very own 270 corridor. Jessica, do you want to talk to us a little bit about the EA process?
Sure, thank you. So right now we are initiating NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, and I'm sure several of you are familiar with NEPA. We went through NEPA on the I-70 Central project. US 36 also went through NEPA. Those were both environmental impact statements. This project is proceeding as an environmental assessment, just given the wide swath of right-of-way that we have in the project area. So really what happens during NEPA is we're looking at all of those environmental resources holistically. We're looking at the transportation improvements that we're proposing, and we're taking a hard look at how those are going to impact the resources, in the community and around the surrounding areas, as well as, just the community impacts as well. So we're kicking off the EA. You'll hear that acronym quite a bit. You'll hear NEPA and EA. So that's the I-270 corridor EA. So we want to take a moment and just say a very big thank you to our financial contributions that have been made by Adams County at $2.5 million, and Commerce City for $1 million. And then the Subregional Forum also put in $1.8 million into this study. So really what that's done is it's catapulted the efforts and made it available for us to move into NEPA seamlessly. So you'll be hearing the terminology, like I said, throughout this presentation, NEPA and EA, and we'll be talking more throughout our time tonight together about the environmental approach that we're taking and the public involvement approach that we're taking.
Yes, and to Jessica's point, we'll talk a little bit more about some of these issues later, but I would just reiterate again that as we go through this process, even though the Vasquez project is sort of technically being evaluated separately, we want to hear your concerns about Vasquez together with this project, because we're really looking at them as one big picture, with our teams working together on them to make sure that we build both of those in a way where they deliver one product for all of you. Adam, you want to take the next slide?
Sure, absolutely. So CDOT's been working for quite some time to get this corridor ready. It's been on our radar, being a corridor that's over 50 years old. A lot of the bridges are over 50 years old. We've been desiring to upgrade this corridor. And of course, the plan is to go from a 4-lane facility to a 6-lane facility. We've kind of been having to wait in the wings behind Central 70 and the clearances for that project that were ongoing for many years. There was in 2014 a Tiger Grant application, which was not successful. And then finally in 2018, we began to get the green light to move. We did a workshop with FHWA to start to draft a purpose and needs statement. In 2019, we did a lot of homework and data gathering, things like historic inventory and hazardous materials in the field. There was a topographical survey completed for the entire corridor using LiDAR, and a traffic study was built for the existing traffic to have an existing traffic model. And also the Express Lanes Master Plan came out, which the next slide speaks to a little bit as well. The Express Lanes Master Plan identified I-270 as a top candidate for the addition of managed lanes. And you can see there's a network, a map of the network that we have. And once a user is within a managed lane, if they have the opportunity to stay in that managed lane for their entire trip, it's probably likely they will. And 270 is really a key link in that system that connects the northern to the eastern metro. And there's a traffic and revenue study in the works that was going to further study what a managed lane could offer in this area.
Sorry, Jessica, you want to take the next one?
Great. So just tying on to what Adam just presented, where we are today. So right now we're initiating NEPA, as I mentioned. That was in April of 2020, we had our kickoff meeting. We recently had our agency scoping meeting, and we just had tremendous engagement from the agencies along the corridor. EPA, as Director Liu mentioned, CDPHE has been a key partner at the table with us in this process. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and a bunch of our other federal agency partners and local, state, and agency partners were at that meeting. So that was really great. We're getting ready August 17th to launch our virtual public meeting room. We're going to give you a tour of that later on in this presentation. And we're anticipating it having a preferred alternative in late 2020. So between now and then, you're going to see and hear a lot about this project. We're going to be soliciting input and reaching out to stakeholders on a regular basis. After we have our preferred alternative selected, we'd like to aim to have a decision document in 2021. So as Director Liu has mentioned, the adjacent Vasquez and 60th Avenue intersection project is in the vicinity of the 270 project. And really those two projects, their movements and their their functions are interwoven. And so we're collaborating those two projects together. In fact, this coming week, we're having a design charrette on August 13th to really take a look at how that intersection can tie in. What does it look like when I-270 is fixed? How does freight function in that area? We've also been linking our public involvement efforts for the 270 corridor with Vasquez. So when you visit the I-270 corridor EA room, you will be able to link and leave comments regarding Vasquez and 60th as well. And when you visit the Vasquez and 60th website room, you can also leave comments for I-270. So we're looking at those in a very holistic fashion as we realize they're interwoven. So what's going on right now? It's summertime, so we've got field crews out. If you've driven the corridor recently, you may have seen some drill rigs out there. We are proactively taking a little bit of a different approach with hazardous materials in the corridor. Typically during NEPA, we identify existing conditions, but we don't do sampling. That's usually pushed till later in the contract when you have a contractor on board. And our approach has been really, we want to know what's out there now. We want to identify any, big red flags that we're seeing so that we can have a little bit tighter contract with the contractor to give them, hoping to get some tighter bids so there's not as many contingencies built into the contract. So you may be seeing some folks out there doing some sampling, both soil and water. We've also been doing biological surveys along Sand Creek and some hydrologic channel surveys as well for the 100-year floodplain. So we are busy and we're in motion. So you will see folks out and around, and you'll also hear from people talking with your constituents. Next slide.
Next slide. All right, so Julie's going to talk for a moment about the public engagement, and then in possibly the best part, Jessica will show you the virtual public meeting room, which is a new tool that we're very excited to be rolling out to all of you. Julie?
Yeah, thanks. So the public engagement piece is really important to us, and we are working really hard to reach as many stakeholders and community groups as we possibly can. So, kind of COVID be damned, if you will. We actually feel like we may be having a more robust community engagement process, even though we can't have our typical in-person meetings. So back in June, we started reaching out to community groups, kind of doing stakeholder scoping meetings to hear from them, to let them know that we're kicking off the EA and just, hear their thoughts, hear what's going on and how 270 impacts their businesses and their lives. We talked to Cultivando, we talked to Greenway Foundation, we talked to a couple of community churches. And now at the end, actually, I guess beginning of next week, we're getting ready to kick off our virtual public meeting room. And in preparation for that, last week, we sent out over 7,000 flyers to let folks know that the room will be opened, how they access it. We, I think just today actually sent over 400 emails to the groups and individuals whose names we have collected through our stakeholder engagement we've already done, and then others that we know are interested. And we are also reaching out to with phone calls, and we have social media going. I actually think the city has helped us with something in your newsletter. So we're really trying to get the word out. And we've worked really hard with the virtual room, that it will be accessible both on a smartphone and on a computer. But for folks who maybe can't access either, we have a hotline, website, and an email address. So if we're contacted through any of those means, somebody from the project team will get back to whomever reaches out. And then all the materials are in English and Spanish, as is the virtual room that we're just about to show you. When you get ready to go in, you choose if you want the English or the Spanish version. And so with that, I think Lexi's going to pull up the room and Jessica's going to talk us through it.
And this is something, just to talk a little bit about what you're going to see. This is a new tool for doing sort of virtual public engagement in a similar way to the way that we would normally have done a public meeting. We actually think that it may be offering opportunities that are more convenient for people than the way we have traditionally done public meetings. So we would love to hear your candid feedback after you've had a chance to go through this process, because if it works, we'll keep it, even beyond the current circumstance that kind of necessitated it. Right. Lexi and Jessica, you want to take us through?
Great, thank you. And I believe that Commerce City recently did some virtual public engagement for your 88th Avenue project. So we're following on the heels of that. So your citizens might be getting used to this new platform. So when you first visit our virtual room, you'll notice that there's very clear directions. We wanted to make sure that folks had no confusion about how to get into the room and how to navigate the room. So as you can see there, we have an option for Spanish. We fully acknowledge that English is not potentially the primary language of all users in the corridor. So the nice thing about the room, the directions are in Spanish. And then as you enter the room, you'll notice in the Spanish platform that all of the boards are also in Spanish. And then we'll go back to English. And one of the great things about the Google website also is that you can translate, and I just recently learned this, you can translate the Google web page. So not our virtual room, but our Google web page translates into numerous languages. So if it's not English or Spanish, you can do Vietnamese and a bunch of other languages as well. So that's a great benefit of having the Google platform for our web page. So now you're in the room, and as you're in the room, it's feeling like a normal public involvement meeting where you would walk around and talk to people, drink some coffee and have a cookie. The board that Lexi's hovering over right there is our video. And the audio was provided by Adam Parks. So you'll hear him narrating the whole video. It's about a 20-minute long video. You can watch it in bite-sized pieces. And then as we keep scrolling around the room, let's go ahead and click on board number 3, Lexi. So the boards zoom in, so you get, really nice graphical representation of the corridor and various resources in the corridor. We have really great tracking mechanisms where we can get data on how long people are spending in the room, how long people spend at a board, how many people watched the video. So the great thing about the room is that, for our future public engagement, we can really dial in on, whether or not the video was too long or too short, or we had too many boards or too few boards. So one of the key things about this public involvement effort right now, if we want to click and highlight board 4, please, we're doing the project Purpose and Need. So we have a draft Purpose and Need, and really this initial outreach is to gain and garner enthusiasm around the Purpose and Need and get feedback from the public. So we want to make sure we're identifying the right needs and identifying the right purpose for the project. So let's go back out of board 4 and let's twist around to board 13. All right, so board 13 is kind of your final landing place. You can leave a comment directly from this room. If you want to click on the comment form, that'll take you to, hopefully we didn't leave the room, but there's your comment form. So we're collecting real-time data. You can also, the next button is the project website. So you can visit the project website where you can also leave a comment. Back on our phone, you can leave a voicemail with the project team. And then finally, you can email your comments. So a variety of ways that you can leave your contact information for future email distribution lists. You can leave comments or connect with a project team member. So we're really, when we first started this, we were interested to see, well, we have COVID, we can't have in-person meetings, and we were a little bit nervous about how we would engage the public. But actually, I think Director Liu is right. I think this might change the way we engage with the public. The evening meetings are challenging for people, and this is an easy way. You can, be walking down the street and leaving a comment or listening to the video. So we're thrilled to see what kind of feedback we gain from this platform. We've also tested it on a bunch of different devices, Google and Android and Apple phone. We've also tested it with several demographics as well to make sure it's really user-friendly. So look forward to kicking this off on August 17th and collecting as many comments as we can, and absolutely want to hear feedback you have on the virtual public event experience.
Right. Not harder to replicate the bad coffee and stale cookie, but hopefully we will weather that storm. Back to the PowerPoint presentation, please. All right, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the factors that we're going to be considering in this environmental assessment, just so that you have a sense of where we're making sure to pay some extra attention, particularly candidly given things that we learned were of concern during the Central 70 process. I mean, what we're really trying to do here, among other things, is we learned a lot about what the sensitivities around construction are in sort of the general area from the Central 70 project, and there's a lot that we can just build on in this review, so that we start off asking, we hope, more of the right questions. I think the first, and this is really important for a lot of reasons, is that in the alternatives analysis, we are really going to explore a number of different configurations of the project. They will all be variants intended to deliver more capacity on 270, but we'll look at a number of different ways to do it. And this will include looking at sort of the trade-offs between doing managed lanes and not. And, we know that there's a range of opinions on that topic, and some pretty strong ones. So we want to make sure that it's something that we really fully air out and explore through this process. The second, we know that there's a lot of concern around air quality. I think we've learned a lot through the Central 70 process about how to effectively measure it, and how, about the state of the art in terms of the technology, for how we can, from the start of this, do a better job being proactive about looking at air quality. So, from the get-go, we are planning to look at the full range of pollutants, including the particulate matter variants, and John can talk a little bit more about that. But one specific item that I'd note is that in parallel to running the EA itself, our research branch is taking on a study to look at air quality and set up monitors in areas where we know that there's concern. So that will be sort of running in parallel to help give us a baseline to be able to understand if there are air quality impacts of the project, and if there are, to be able to mitigate them. Next slide. So looking at environmental justice considerations is going to be a big part, as John mentioned earlier, of the way that we're approaching the sort of questions that we're trying to answer through this project. I think one of the things that's important to us in sort of combining the look at Vasquez with the look at 270 is to make sure that we're really thinking, both about the traffic that goes through and, the traffic that makes Commerce City itself work. So, I think from our perspective, we really want to hear about both. We want to hear both what the community needs to be able to kind of, keep the economy and quality of life within Commerce City moving, and also to be able to have the highway project carry traffic through in an efficient manner that moves both people and freight. We know that there are issues with disparate impacts with respect to air quality here. I know that there are factors other than CDOT factors, and part of the reason it was important for us to be here with our friends at the health department is to be able to have one conversation about all of the sort of factors that are impacting the community, so that to the extent possible, we can coordinate our efforts to be, kind of proactive in that regard. The focus on freight needs, we get it on how vital this is as a freight corridor. We also know how important, freight is to the economy. We've heard from our colleagues, in the Motor Carriers Association numerous times that, both for work and life, this is an area that's of great importance to the freight community. So that, is something that is going to be a significant look for us. Next slide. Looking at cumulative and indirect impacts, again, we know that impacts associated with this project, kind of combine with all the other factors that, come to bear, in a place like Commerce City. So, to us, making sure that we look at these together and understand the interplay between, different factors, is particularly important. So, we'll be looking at both sort of how traffic from this project kind of combines with other traffic, as well as looking at how air pollution associated with this project combines with other pollutants that affect the environment. And finally, taking a collaborative approach to like how we see what the downsides are and manage them. I mean, the reality is you can't do a project of this size without there being some downsides, right? The very things that make it work have impacts, and that's sort of the tension that we always manage when we improve infrastructure. So, I think to the point about, what did we learn from Central 70, some of those conversations happened very productively at the end. And, I'll bet that very long process could have been a lot more efficient if, we had just sort of asked people candidly at the beginning, like, what are the issues going to be? Let's identify them together and figure out, how we can design and build the project in a manner that addresses those issues from the front end. So, we really want all of you to raise things that you're concerned about at the beginning so that we can factor those into the way that we think through the project. Again, the feedback we got from you about Vasquez and 270 projects needing to be combined at the beginning has already changed the way that we're executing this project. So, we want you to be candid with us. We really ask for any and all opinions. We hope there's a range, and we look forward to sort of working through all of these things together. And then I will turn it over to John.
Thank you, Shoshana. And next slide, please. Oh, terrific. Thank you. So just to reinforce what Executive Director Lou pointed out and her team pointed out, we really are pleased to be brought in at the very beginning here to start thinking through some of these important issues. And we want to make sure that this study and this process is coordinated with a number of other areas where we have work going on with the city and with Adams County right now. Certainly had the discussion about the chemical sales Superfund site tonight, but there are certainly others. As most of you know, there is an ongoing health outcome study happening just to the south in the Globeville, Elyria, and Swansea neighborhoods. That process is going through procurement right now and will be very important. We're in the process of implementing the Suncor environmental supplemental projects process right now. That community process has begun and will be going, I think, with full vigor through the next number of months so that we can identify the best community identified projects for the $2.6 million that come from the settlement with Suncor in March. In addition, Suncor is working to implement its requirements under the settlement agreement to implement a new enhanced community notification process for upsets, other sort of pieces. As we'll talk about a little bit later this evening, and CDOT has noticed, we're working hard to get additional air monitoring capability into Commerce City to improve our ability to understand what's happening in the air on a number of areas, both for transportation, like on Interstate 270, but also stationary sources in town, and look forward to further engagement and really appreciate the cooperation with Commerce City staff, along with Tri-County Health Department, the Denver Health Department, and Adams County as well. In addition to the chemical sales Superfund site, we also overlap with the Vasquez Boulevard I-70 Superfund site, as well as the Rocky Mountain Arsenal, both of which obviously have effects in that area. And in addition to the 1,4-dioxane issues that you discussed earlier this evening, we're working with the Water District and others on PFAS-related issues, including those in the Sand Creek corridor, and look forward to further engagement with both the city and the community on that front. And beyond that, there's just a whole host of other air quality, hazardous materials, and water compliance issues, the permitting, enforcement, other sort of work that we do day to day, that we work with your staff, work with staff with the health department and others. And we're going to be working closely with CDOT to make sure that that information is integrated here, and really try to work hard to ensure that these concerns are first and foremost in this EA process, and that CDOT is going in with the best body of information and data to then match with the expertise that you and the community are providing, for people's real concerns in this area and what this project can do to improve those.
All right, so I think that is it for our presentation. I believe we have a few minutes to take some questions.
I'd like to thank you, Director Liu, as well as everybody on your team and CDPHE for coming and presenting this to us. Very informative and nice to be on the ground floor of the planning process and understand what steps are going to be taking place. I think it's also great that you're going to include our residents as early as possible so that they have opinions and can share those opinions with everybody. So with that being said, anybody on council have any questions for the staff? Councilwoman Allen Thomas.
Yes, thank you for the presentations. I was just curious, since there's going to be toll lanes, will Commerce City be paid back at all for their, for the donation or anything for the toll lanes, or will any of that money go back to Commerce City eventually?
So we haven't actually made a decision about the toll lanes yet. I would. We are taking a serious look at it because it's one of the most potentially viable pathways to pay for the project. Part of the reason we're looking at the pros and cons of different alternatives is to make sure that we have all of the feedback before we make a decision on that. When we do have managed lands on other corridors, they have to be, because of the statute under which they're collected, they have to be sort of spent on the corridor. So they can't, those proceeds, because it's a fee, can't be used on things other than roads within the corridor, but they sort of have to stay within the neighborhood, so to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Noble.
Thank you so much for the presentation. You mentioned a design charrette on August 13th. Mm-hmm. Who is participating in the charrette?
It's a lot of the same cast of characters that's here this evening. We'll have Jessica and Adam and the team are going to walk through in a fair amount of technical detail, along with some of our colleagues who've been working on the Vasquez details before we sort of combine the project. Jessica or Adam, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I believe from your side, Mayor Huseman is invited, and I'm just pulling up the invite right now. And we've got Brent Soderlin, your engineer, will be there present. And a couple others from your staff. So it'll be a good representation of both Commerce City folks, and then we've got Adams County who will be participating virtually, and then a few other CDOT people. So it should be a good event. We're excited to see how it works out. It is in person. There's a portion that's in person, and there's a portion that's virtual. So we have plenty of virtual seats available if you'd like to be invited and listen in, but we are limited to the in-person seats just because of the COVID restrictions.
Thank you very much. I am one of the new people, so I didn't start until December, and I think there's clearly conversations that have taken place with the city council and the staff long before 4 of us joined the city council. And I'm curious what the need is for this Vasquez 270 combination. And let me just start there. I'm curious what the need is, why they are seen as one, why you're seeing them as one item.
It looked like the mayor was potentially about to chime in. Did you want to speak to that?
Sure, I can chime in. So if you remember a couple months ago, we got a presentation on the 60th and Vasquez improvements, and the presentation was about some quick fix items that were being proposed. After having that meeting, we had a meeting with CDOT, went out and visited the site, and one of the ways that we are trying to get more funding to get that intersection done correctly the first time instead of doing quick hits and going back and trying to repair it later is to tie it all together as one large project in order to make it fund itself, basically. So it was separate, and through a lot of pushing and a lot of cooperation between the two parties, we've gotten to the point where we're trying to work it together.
Oh, thank you very much. That would have been interesting to know that we were doing that. Thank you. I am, though, seeing that what one of the issues is here is that you're seeing Vasquez as a freight corridor, and we're seeing Vasquez, or at least some of us are seeing Vasquez as a central business area. And I don't see how those work together to accomplish your goals on 270. It sounds like you're going to be rerouting traffic onto Vasquez, and that's why you need these changes made on Vasquez.
Well, it's exactly the right question to ask, and part of the reason we're having this design charrette in the conversation is to see what we can do to kind of possibly optimize for both purposes. You know, we know that it needs to sort of play double duty as a point that's important to accessing 270, but that it's also the central business district for you. You know, we actually are, the group of us who are on this call went and just spent some time at the intersection a few weeks ago to try and get a sense of the feel for, you know, what it is like to be trying to access those businesses. So, you know, we get that very complicated, messy intersection right now has to be doing two things. So, you know, what I'm hopeful that folks will see at the charrette later this week, you know, is a range of choices to try and do both things. And, you know, one of the things we're going to look at is, do you take some of the traffic over, you know, to try and free up the area between the business districts so that you can have fewer directions going, you know, at the single grade. And, you know, are there ways that we can use traffic control to improve it? You know, there will be a few different ways that we look at how you do both at once, but we realize that it's sort of a lot to put on one intersection to be doing both of those things, but that, you know, part of the reason we are actually slowing down the Vasquez project a bit is to try and do a better job doing both of those, if that answers your question. So we want your feedback on the letter because we know they're both important.
So it will be moving traffic, detouring traffic onto Vasquez from 270 while that project is going on. Is that the concept?
Well, the concept is that for the long-term life of the project, that intersection has to be able to, you know, both be a way that people get onto 270, but also it's right in the middle of the city, and it is the corner that connects the businesses and the residential neighborhood to the commercial neighborhood. So we get that it has to be able to do all of those things, and that there are a few different ways that we can route traffic that will have different results. So part of what we're going to walk through on Thursday is trying to look at some of the different options that are on the table to sort of think through together, you know, what will happen if we build it like this. So that's the purpose of the Thursday evening conversation.
And it would seem to me that a managed lane sort of is contrary to what exists along 270 in terms of financial pressures, that the very people who live and work along 270 are the very people who actually can't afford a tollway. So I hope that we would keep that in mind also if they use 270. It is a terribly, terribly congested road, and I have used it many times. And I was in the fortunate position because I was, you know, a privileged person to be able to take E470 to miss it on a long commute from Wellington to Anschutz. So I'm lucky that way, but not everybody can do that. And I hope we're careful about that.
Yep. That is one of the very important things we'll be looking at.
Any other questions from council? All right, seeing no additional questions, again, would like to thank everybody from CDOT and CDPHE for your time this evening, for your presentation, and look forward to seeing this project progress, excuse me. And next on the agenda is going to be the city's master plan updates presentation. Would the city clerk please move all the panelists over, and will Jenny Axmacher, city planner, make the presentation?
Good evening, everyone. Give me just a second to share my screen. All right, can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can, Jenny, and I believe I've got everybody on your list moved over to panelists as well.
Thank you so much, Dylan. So good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Jenny. I've been a planner with the city for about 15 years now, and it's truly an honor for me to get to talk to you all tonight about such an important topic as updating the vision for the future of the city, not only through the comprehensive plan, but also the transportation master plan, the economic development strategic plan, and the Parks and Rec and Golf strategic plan as well. The good news is I now have many slides to use to share my enthusiasm for the topic with you. So let's get to it. So why are we here? Back in 2018 or 2019, council requested staff undertake a project to update the city's master plans. More recently, back in June, council requested additional information on the project in order to consider a contract for a consultant. So tonight I'm going to talk about the purpose, need, use, and necessary updates for each of the 4 different plans. I'm also going to describe the process for the updates and wrap up with a few key next steps. First up is the comprehensive plan. So what is the purpose of the comprehensive plan? It's a long-range policy guide. It establishes the vision of what the community wants to be. It informs land use decisions, areas for reinvestment, employment growth, and other key topics. So why do we need a comprehensive plan? To facilitate growth and development of the city, to develop a community vision, to encourage economic growth, to protect environmentally sensitive lands, and to protect property from natural hazards. How do we use the comprehensive plan? It provides goals to achieve. It gives us background data. It talks about the history of the community and provides a plan for future land use. It's generally updated every 7 to 10 years to keep the information current and useful. So here's the organizational structure of the city's current comprehensive plan. You might note that the plan establishes guiding principles, which are then broken down into goals and policies, and then strategies. The indicators tell us how well we're doing at achieving these goals. Here's the future land use plan for the current comprehensive plan. It identifies different types of development and where they would ideally occur within the city. You can also use the comprehensive plan to guide policy. From this pyramid diagram, you can see that the comprehensive plan establishes the vision for the community. The subsequent master plans expand on this vision. Specific plans, such as the Station Area Master Plan, add details to this vision. The Land Development Code works to codify the vision and provide regulations. The work plan implements the vision. The CIP projects construct the vision, and then building inspections audit and ensure that the projects comply with this vision. Ultimately, the hope is that the built environment achieves the vision. So let's look specifically at the work plan and the comprehensive plan relationship. Back in 2019, the work plan outcome 1.1 actually comes directly from the comprehensive plan as land use goal 1. But within the comprehensive plan, that goal is actually supported by many other goals other than just land use. Maintaining a balanced mix of land uses is supported by economic development, financial stability, housing, transportation, and public facility goals in the comp plan as well. This shows how interconnected these policies really are. So what have we accomplished with our 2010 comp plan? An audit was completed by staff prior to the issuance of the RFP for a consultant. A summary of this audit was included in the packet, but it looks at the implementation success of policies, strategies, and goals from 1 to 10, with 10 being the most successful implementation. Results ranged from unimplemented policies to successful system-wide improvements. The goal is to have the consultants also conduct a complementary assessment of the existing plan once on board. Specific successes of the comprehensive plan include creation of additional planning documents, such as the Station Area Master Plan and the Irondale Neighborhood and Infrastructure Plan. We've increased the trail system, and we've provided greater partnerships with the Housing Authority through the comprehensive plan. So why do we need to update this plan? Right now, these separate plans aren't always aligned. We need the comp plan, the work plan, and the council goals to work together to successfully implement the vision of the community. We also need increased focus on sustainability goals, and we want to implement sustainability throughout the plan. There's also a need for a detailed financial impact assessment. We can also gain efficiencies by updating all of the city's master plans together at the same time through data sharing, consistency of documentation, and budget savings. The goal is to have all master plans updated at the end of this overall project. We also need an update because the market has changed rapidly over 10 years. The world has also changed since March due to the pandemic, which has led to budget concerns, but has also provided an opportunity to have cutting edge data and have these master plans react to those changes. We also run the risk of being at a competitive disadvantage to our neighboring jurisdictions. As you can see from the slide, most of our neighbors have either updated a plan more recently than we have, or are looking to undergo an update here in the next year. All right, so now let's transition to the Transportation Master Plan. The TMP was updated in conjunction with the 2010 C3 Vision Plan. The purpose of the Transportation Master Plan is to provide a link between the transportation system and land uses and growth. It identifies policies, strategies, and actions to meet the community's goals, but periodic updates are key. The TMP also sets groundwork for safe, accessible, and sustainable systems to connect people and places. Why do we need a transportation master plan? It summarizes the city's transportation policies and strategies. It also addresses where improvements are needed in areas of congestion, as well as estimates improvement costs and improvement impacts. So how does the city use the transportation master plan? It identifies project prioritizations for roadway improvements, transit system improvements, and bike and pedestrian improvements. It also gives us a guide to measure the success of these improvements. What have we accomplished from the current transportation master plan? We've constructed multi-use paths. We've created a traffic calming policy. We've implemented crosswalk policies and innovations of systems and technology upgrades. Why do we need to update the plan? Growth and congestion in the Northern Range, substantial population growth throughout the city. There's impacts due to the new fast tracks corridors, anticipated funding challenges and opportunities. So next we'll talk about the Economic Development Strategic Plan. This plan was completed by a consultant separately from the 2010 Comp Plan and Master Transportation Plan. So economic development influences changes in a community through wealth generation, diversification, job growth, and by building the tax base. The plan sets the vision of the desired economic change within the city. This plan helps focus efforts, commitments, and ultimately resources to help achieve this vision. The economic development plan is long-term focused. However, updates are key to staying competitive during economic change. As a clarification, I know Council has recently heard from Katie Press about a retail assessment going on now. This is not the strategic plan update. It's a narrowly focused retail study. The ED strategic plan update has a more global vision and will reevaluate target industries for business development and identify prioritization for overall business retention and incentive programs. So why do we need to update the Economic Development Strategic Plan? To evaluate the impacts from the pandemic, to acknowledge E470 shovel-ready sites, to incorporate the regional aerotropolis efforts, explore TOD opportunities with the fast track station, and consider the impacts of the additional residential growth within the city. The last plan I'm going to talk about tonight is the Parks, Recreation, and Golf Master Plan. It's important to clarify that this is the only plan that's not technically an update because a combined plan for all three of these topics does not exist. So what the purpose of the new document will be is to create a renewed direction for parks, trails, and open space, recreation, and golf citywide, including the future growth areas of the community. It will revise the inventory and conduct outreach with current stakeholders to establish a vision. Right now, this information is spread out over 4 different plans dating from 1994 to 2014. The plan will be used as a guide for future programs and operating budgets. It will guide improvements and allow the Parks, Rec, and Golf Department to prioritize requests for new items like skate parks and tennis courts and dog parks. It will guide land acquisitions and identify partnerships and potential funding sources. Why is the new plan needed? To reflect today's community and to create a consolidated plan for guiding present and future planning. All right, that was a lot of information, but let's shift gears and talk a little bit about the master plan update process. An RFP was issued last summer to find a consultant to complete all 4 of the plan updates. A consultant was selected in late 2019 by a team including representatives from all participating city departments, including the city manager's office. All the plans will be updated by the end of 2022. The comprehensive plan kickoff will start first. It's anticipated that the comprehensive plan update will take 12 to 18 months with adoption in late 2021. So let's take a look at the budget. So it's important to note that for the funds for all the different plans, that the funds will be expended over multiple years. Right now we have a maximum fund expenditure for 2020 written into the contract of $75,000. So it's included as a provision within the contract and the consultant is agreeable to that proposal. So for the different plans, the comprehensive plan is about $300,000, the transportation plan, $200,000, the ED strategic plan, $67,000, the Parks, Rec, and Golf master plans, $150,000, for a total of $717,000 for all the plan updates. Just for reference, I included these amounts that we spent on the comp plan update and the transportation plan update in 2010, so you have those for comparison. The ED strategic plan and Parks, Rec, and Golf master plan were not included as part of those. So there are currently approved appropriations within the CIPP for all of the plans except the ED plan. There are new requests in for the 2021 CIPP for the economic development plan and some additional funds for the comp plan to provide facilities forecasting and expanded bilingual outreach for all 4 of the different plans. I'd also like to point out that the Parks plans funding actually comes from lottery dollars as well as a grant fund. And in addition, there's a small Healthy Places funds provided for the plan. So let's talk a little bit about the consultant that staff is recommending. We have selected Housel Levine. They have an extensive master planning experience. And while they're located in Chicago, they've done quite a bit of work locally within Colorado. Okay. They've frequently been recognized for their work, most recently by the Colorado chapter of the American Planning Association for their 2019 comprehensive plan for the city of Aurora. Here's a couple examples from that Aurora plan. And staff liked the plan because it was so graphic intensive, using maps, tables, and charts more than large blocks of text to provide information. This approach makes the plan more usable for the entire community instead of just collecting dust on a shelf because it's too much to read. So next week, a resolution will come before council for you to consider, authorizing the execution of a contract with Housel Levine to update all 4 of these master plans, and the contract would not exceed $717,000. Should council choose to authorize that contract, the comp plan would kick off shortly. Staff would then be looking for council assistance in establishing a citizens advisory committee. There would also be an elected officials roundtable in the fall and the creation of a project charter. The subsequent plans would kick off a bit later, with all plan updates once again being completed by the end of 2022. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, but if you're tired of listening to me talk, I also have subject matter experts from a handful of the different city departments also available to answer any specific questions on those plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive review of the plans. Appreciate your time this evening. Is there anyone on council that has any questions for staff regarding this item? Councilwoman Noble.
Thank you very much for your report. And I would also in particular like to thank the staff for providing us with comprehensive plan goals by chapter from 2010. And because I had wanted to know what had been accomplished from 2010 and what still needed to be accomplished. So we have some areas that, we really have had difficulties with that show a 1, and other areas that may have shown some success that ranged up to around a 7, like coordinate growth regionally, or increase economic diversification, although I'm not sure if we've actually quite accomplished that yet, benefits of development, etc. What confuses me, though, after having looked at the contract for services, is how we wound up with these 3 master plans as part of the contract for services, trailing the start of the comprehensive plan. My experience with comprehensive plans or those kinds of things, and I was on a comprehensive plan committee for 2 years and the chair for the final 6 months in another city. Why it isn't resident driven, it seems to be staff driven.
The need for the proceeding with the project actually comes from council. It was directed in 2018 or 2019 for staff to conduct the master plan updates. So that's the genesis for the kickoff of the projects.
And the council chose those out of the blue without any direction, any suggestions from staff?
Those were the primary plans that govern a majority of the city and seemed most logical to update.
I had another question about this, and that is participation. And in my experience, comprehensive plans are very participatory, and that's the whole idea behind them, is that these are driven by residents and other stakeholders in determining what the desired ideal future is for Commerce City. And given the pandemic and the difficulty in bringing people together to do this kind of thing, it's very intensive and very, it's really a wonderful project for people to work on. It seems like this is bad timing for us. We are in a really great position in some ways because there are new ways of looking at the world and how we're moving forward, and whether people are happier actually working remotely than they are working in facilities or offices or whatever the case might be. So we actually are in a better place than cities that have already done their master plan and don't have the benefit of knowing that we were entering this pandemic world and how that might change things. But given the fact that we're spending, we will be spending time and a lot of money on a new city manager, that or someone who's on staff or someone that will be coming from outside staff, whatever ends up being the case, is that this seems like a challenging time to be doing this, and in fact not a good time to be doing it because of the pandemic and getting citizen involvement, which is critical to a successful plan. And that it would be in some ways better for us just to go back to the one from 2010 and make sure that we've accomplished some of the things that are called for in that plan and can affect change. We still wound up with planned unit development land use throughout the community, which is very ill-defined. It's kind of a bucket for a lot of different zoning types. And it just seems like if the staff could bring us assessments, rolling assessments of things that you're figuring out, that this would be a good use of figuring out how those plans can be incorporated at this time and made use of, that already exist and need to be amended.
Does staff have a response they wish to add on that?
Thank you, Mayor. Jason Rogers, Community Development Director, and it's a pleasure being with you all tonight. I think I will try to decouple, kind of break out the various statements that I heard from Councilmember Noble, and if I happen to miss one, please just nudge me and I'll touch upon it. I'll say this: I respectfully offer that the city's at a critical juncture point, particularly given with how the market, the environment of what we've come to know and understand as land use and growth, and particularly the decisions that's associated with growth and how it impacts transportation investments and or decisions and funding of some of those decisions as we go forward into the future. And I think where we stand today presents an actually very unique opportunity for, I think, redefining how we look at community engagement. I will say in any comp plan update, minor or major or a complete retooling, which I would say that this is a major update, given as we can, I'll present as an example, the commercial market where power centers were the rage, still the rage back in 2008 and 2010, are no longer the case today. And we have significant sections of our comp plan that speak towards these community and these power centers, which are outmoded, antiquated, and quite frankly, need to be evaluated. And obviously the necessary infrastructure, both from a transportation, also from an economic development perspective, and ultimately amenities that would be tied through our PRG master plan in order to be able to create that connected community. So it's critical for us to be able to really provide that, and that audit provides, I'll say, a tipping point of that assessment. Now, that consultant that we would bring in would be able to take that audit and really be able to pull back the onion leaves and really see where we actually need to further refine or develop new practices and or how to be able to tackle some of these developing trends that we're hearing about, so that we can put ourselves in a competitive advantage with being able to attract those within the development community who are actually able to meet the various policies that we set forward. But as we get through that process, one of the key things that we see that I will say is kind of woven into every aspect of what we do with this update over the next 18 months is community engagement. I don't have the scope of work on hand with me, but Jenny, if you can look at that for a minute, the number of meetings, the number of, once again, different levels of activation and sources of media, both social, print, and or through online, for us to be able to engage all various socioeconomic demographics of our city so that we can get that feedback. Once again, the demographics of 2010, and if you look at one of our initial memos that we sent out to you, is starkly different and increasing from that period of then to today. So we want to be able to capture what has been that changing voice and what will be that changing voice for us to continue to keep building on the foundation. The 2010s a foundation. It's not a throwaway. So it's something that we want to be able to build on, and we want to have the community brought along with us through that process. And I go back to, if you look at part of the presentation, use of the comp plan, flow of policy, that pyramid, that comp plan really sets that building block for how you engage on a number of different levels. Councilmember Noble, you had brought up PUD zone docs. Well, PUD zone docs is a mechanism, somewhat of a creation of the land development code that we have in place, but ultimately, as well as the comp plan, focus in, I'll say, description of land use types and how to be able to accomplish those. But updating the comp plan, you inherently are then going to look at your land development code to being able to provide the necessary mechanisms or zone districts that would allow for a much more effective and efficient master planning effort that ties back into the overall process. I'd also kind of talk briefly about transportation investments. They sometimes occur before a land use investment, but most frequently, some of those land use decisions that are made are coming before transportation funding. So most land use and transportation coordination challenges occur because the decisions are made by different, I'll say, different decision-making actors and bodies, different geographic scales, and at different time frames. So being able to, I'll look at the intrinsic link of when you look at land use and transportation functions, this is that effort and an opportunity for us to continue planning out the eventual growth of the Northern Range. Once again, as we look at the reinvestment of the core city, but ultimately as well the growth areas which still account for 35 plus square miles of undeveloped land that we want to make sure that we are planning accordingly. So I go back to it. I would respectfully offer that this is a critical juncture point, as you've seen just by what our neighbors have done, right? They understand that it's a critical juncture point as well because of how the dynamics of the environment have changed so dramatically over the past 10 years. And if I may add, thank you, Jane, for being able to provide me numbers. We are going to actually be having meetings every 6 weeks with more than 30 plus outreach meetings in different formats. And that doesn't mean or take into account some of our other more social media and or written media platforms that we can still leverage outside of these outreach meetings over an 18-month period. So significant outreach with our community.
I see on the service contract that there are monthly meetings with staff, with the staff working group, but quarterly meetings with other stakeholders. So I think it should just be the opposite, and a comp plan without doing the other plans presently. If you're suggesting moving forward, I really don't think it's the time to move forward when people are not available. They're simply not coming and participating in stuff. And when we're talking about a $717,000 contract, which was on our consent calendar and needed to be discussed as we're doing tonight, I think it's important that we take into consideration the environment, as you point out, that is occurring around us right now and the availability of citizens who actually participate in the process, which is critical to a successful comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Councilman Guardiola.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, staff, where I don't disagree with y'all at all. I think this is something that needs to happen. I think it's useful. I definitely think it has to happen. But when no one expected the pandemic, and when citizens are in a different mind state, different time, spending $717,000 during a pandemic is a little bit too much, I think. Not too much, but is there a way, looking at the timeline, that we could break it up so we don't have to spend it all up front right now, just in case something else, if we have to do another business, small business grant, nonprofit grant, mortgage, could we break it up and, maybe start with the comprehensive plan and then keep going? Because I just don't, we're spending a lot of money right now on a lot of things, and, and it's taxpayer money. And this is going to benefit them. I totally agree with what you just said, Director Rogers. The presentation's great. I looked them up. I think they would do a fine job. I just can't see myself voting for something over $700,000 right now. That's the decision we have to make. But I think it's needed. I think we have to get it done because of all the great reasons, and it's going to better our city. And I'm glad you've added the Parks and Rec, the ED, all of that, but is there a way we could spread it out? That way we're not using $717,000 during this hard time.
So I'm going to turn that over to Jane a lot further to kind of walk through how this is going to break out.
Thank you. So right now the contract has a limitation that no more than $75,000 would be spent on any of the plans. This is a cumulative total $75,000 for anything in 2020. The next plan doesn't start until 2021, and that would be the Transportation Master Plan. The contract is written in such a way that if we want to stop with the comprehensive plan and not continue on with the additional master plans, we do have that opportunity. All three of the additional plans are at the city's desire to continue. So if we, for example, decided that we wanted to go with a different contractor, or we just didn't have the additional funds available, we could stop with the comp plan. I don't believe that would be staff's recommendation, but it's certainly doable. And then the next plan after the transportation plan doesn't start until the end of 2021. So those expenses likely wouldn't be incurred until 2022.
Okay, thank you for that. And that does help. So is there a way we could start voting gradually? That way we don't say 717,000. Nope, we did 75,000 and then the 200,000 and go from there. Because if we vote the 717,000, it seems to me that we're a little bit tied in, although we could change, like you said. But I think splitting it up would be a lot easier to explain to our residents, saying, hey, we're doing this right now, we're doing this, and bringing that up to vote each time we're going back. Knowing that, I mean, it wouldn't be smart if we go to another company, right? If they've done all this work for the first two.
So I think part of that, I mean, I am not an expert in procurement and obviously the legal aspect that's tied to that. I leave that in the good hands of finance and Mr. Robert Sheasley. But I would impart that I think by trying to be surgical in an approach with how we expend dollars, and I think there is a level of appreciation by the consultant understanding that the COVID-19 pandemic has affected a level of expenditures and revenues, and was willing to work with us on how to structure that 75,000. It's hard for me to say whether or not they would be willing to commit themselves to a much more surgical structured approach, where obviously, as I shared, and we shared you within that table with respect to our neighbors who have and are trying to engage in these similar activities, it is a hot market with trying to, once again, best project for its future. I would say typically when you look at updating a comp plan, you're not really realizing the fruits of what you've laid to bear working with your community and participation with establishing policy standards, land use, and so forth, and transportation associated with that and the other, really until 3 to 5 years after you've actually have gotten it in place. Most of the best communities start to experience that maybe 2 years within a time frame after they've actually been able to get it adopted and actually established. So, you know, my fear and my professional advice would be to you that, I mean, there could be the opportunity that by going and trying to structure it that way in a manner of sense, is that the consultant could bail. I think one thing to make clear is that with what we came with Housel Levine, and Jenny, please clarify if I misspeak, but the next closest consultant that we had identified was still $200,000 higher than what we were able to move forward with Housel Levine with respect to this comprehensive approach. So when you start to look at that, we're back into the process of selecting a new consultant, going through that procurement process to ultimately still find us where we're at today, with the dollar amounts brought before you based on the number of plans that we are trying to move forward for the betterment and the improvement of the quality of life for our citizens, which still would put you out possibly to 2022, 2023 before you're really actually starting to make some inroads with getting something in writing as far as a comp plan.
Thank you.
Councilman Madera.
Yeah, I was going to ask, I think this question was already answered because I think Director Rogers addressed it about community outreach and if it would be prohibitive in this environment right now. But as we saw in the presentation prior to this with CDOT, they're expecting more engagement from the community based off of these new formats that we're turning to, as opposed to, you know, when we used to have open houses and, you know, I don't know if anyone's ever been to one, but you get, you know, 10, 20 people, and that's a big crowd, right? So I just want to know what staff's, or if staff has any concerns about community involvement in this process in the current environment.
So I will actually, oh, I see Roger about to weigh, so I will yield the floor to the interim city manager.
Thank you, Jason. Just wanted to point out that Public Works is having an open forum right now, a virtual room. That's what CDOT director referred to. And that's for Rosemary. And it's open until August 16, but already they have 160 plus comments so far. Now, when we had the open house for 88th Avenue up in that same area, as I recall, the most we had were 30 people. So you can see that having this virtual room has tremendously increased the participation. So I don't think we need to worry about the COVID-19 causing, you know, a lack of participation. In fact, I think we probably would have higher participation because people need something to divert their attention, quite honestly.
And my next question was in terms of funding. So have we, well, I think I know the answer to this one too, is have we set any money aside for this comprehensive plan, or, you know, have we been planning to begin this process, you know, around this time frame?
Yes, all the money has been appropriated and it's in the CIPP, the Capital Improvement and Preservation Plan.
Okay. And as far as the Parks and Rec, I saw that we had some lottery funds and some Adams County Open Space Grant. Aside from this comprehensive plan, what other things could it be used for? Because I've heard some of my colleagues mention some concerns about COVID and spending in terms of that. Would this be able to be used for anything COVID related?
Not the lottery and open space money, no. Unless it was, again, directly related, I should amend that. If it's directly related to parks, recreation, open space, then yes, but just purely COVID-19, no.
Okay, and yeah, I guess, you know, this next one's just more of a general comment. I mean, I think back to where I was at in 2010, and I was, you know, graduating, you know, grad school around that time, and, you know, a lot has changed in the city since then. You know, most of the population numbers were a lot less. The developers that we had in the city, and, you know, some of those visions that people had for the cities were different. You know, even in terms of our parks that we had, you know, we didn't have 2K. There's a lot of things that have changed over these past 10 years. You know, we were just coming out of the Great Recession, and these types of things that we're in a completely different economical environment now. And so many things have changed that, you know, it's really imperative that we get an updated comprehensive plan, let people from the community chime in and, you know, set that vision for our city that's going to go for the next 10 years. Because, you know, we could keep moving with our just watching the rearview mirror, but then we're going to get left behind. And, you know, that's something that we complain about all the time with economic development and all these things that we see our neighbors doing. And, you know, it's scary. It's a big ticket item, but I don't think staff would be bringing this to us if we were not in a position financially to follow through with this, and if the benefits didn't outweigh the costs, which, you know, obviously these costs are, it's a big sticker, but you got to think about it too in terms of how vendors work, right? If we have all these package deals that the vendors leveraging the work off of the various different plans that they're working on, because they're all connected, it all benefits the city, then they're able to do that at a more economical price for us than if we were to break this out and do one piece here, then a couple years later try to put this out for bid, and then by the time we finally finish these comprehensive plans, well, the plans that we started with are going to be outdated. So this is kind of one of those things that you have to do as a package deal. It's intensive. I mean, what was the timeline? Was it like 12, 18 months?
18 months, council member.
Yeah, so it takes a year and a half to do this. And if we were to break this out, how long would that take us to do?
I think you could safely assume another 10 to 12 months on top of that 18 months of a full completion of updating all of the master plans.
So say like 2.5 years. That's a long time to have invested in this. And I guess my final question for staff is, how badly do we need this updated?
My professional opinion, I think, like I said, we're at a critical juncture. We can already start to tell that there are changing signs of the environment, of the market, and obviously of growth and development. And once again, there's long-standing impacts when you don't have a comp plan that's able to respond and to provide that roadmap, both from a land use vision and ultimately an establishment of an economic development environment that has the necessary infrastructure planned at a high level so that you can, once again, pivot and be able to achieve that at the, I'll say, the finer detailed and implementation level of your land development code, of your CIPPP projects that are identified that come together, or just the year-over-year work plan that influences a number of both programmatic and project-based approaches that we undertake. So it's a trickle effect. If you do not update it, we'll start to see the trickle effects shortly thereafter. So I would say, like I said, we're at a critical juncture to really be able to take that next step forward and continuing to build on a solid foundation. I'm not going to say that the comp plan achieved everything and was perfect. No, not at all. But it did establish a strong foundation that I think we can continue to build and be able to be more, I'll say, dynamic in how we look at developing trends and being able to respond to those to provide the necessary resources for our citizens across the gamut. And I would say this plan not only affects us, but it affects those who we work very closely with external to the city. That's South Adams County Water and Sand. That's the fire district. That's the airport. There are a number of other stakeholders that rely on what we project and how we want to grow in order for them to be able to provide the necessary resources to the city as well. So that's why I say we're at that critical junction point as well, because we have so much of an impact, given that we are at the influential forefront of growth and development in the Front Range, that we need to be able to also set that tone on how we want to grow and how have those in support of us to be able to respond accordingly.
I would add to that comprehensive plan, these other plans, they're quite similar to automobiles. The longer you have them, the less value they have. And this is a 10-year-old plan at this point. And so its relevance and its value has diminished tremendously. And, as a manager, there's still a little residual value in that comprehensive plan, but realistically, as Mr. Rogers has pointed out, it really isn't all that valuable anymore as a guiding document. We have a totally new council and mayor. I think it's time to have a totally new comprehensive plan. Yes, it's a little bit awkward in terms of timing because of the COVID-19, but I think with using virtual room technology, we can still get tremendous input from the community. In addition, if you proceed with city manager search, that new manager will be here during this process and can provide input. So I think in that sense, it's a good time to do it. We have the money appropriated, it's there. It's separate from the reserves for the general fund. So I would recommend that you proceed, but of course that's your decision as the 9-member body.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree as well.
Councilwoman Allen Thomas.
Yes, thank you for your presentations. And I agree with Roger as well. And another concern that I have is, since I am a new council member, I'm curious what the bid process was and how you came up with just the one company as well. And then the 2K project, like I said, and Roger mentioned too, is from 2010. And with the COVID pandemic, I do think, it should be reevaluated. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenny, if you can kind of give a high level summary of the procurement process and what we undertook and how we evaluated and came to make a decision on House of Levine.
Certainly. We decided to go for an RFP for all 4 plans to be updated at the same time because we thought that we could provide efficiencies through data gathering, background research that would inform not only the comprehensive plan, but all 4 of the plans together. We also thought we could get it done quicker by having one consultant complete all 4 of the different plans. So we issued an RFP. We got, 5 different responses to that RFP. I will tell you, House of Levine did have the most inexpensive proposal submitted. However, we liked their proposal regardless of the cost associated. The company that created our previous comprehensive plan, Clarion Associates, they also submitted a bid. They came in, I think, at least $100,000 more for the plan updates than the current proposal. So we interviewed 4 of the different companies. It was a cross panel involving all the different departments that are updating their master plans, as well as the city manager's office and communications. So critical issues that we looked at were the outreach proposals. We are very concerned about having good outreach and getting good community feedback as part of all of the plan updates. So we took a look at that, as well as their experience with plans, how familiar they are with the region in this area, and then just comfort with the staff that we thought would be a good dynamic with our community in completing the process.
But is it correct that we're landed locked with current transportation? We can only go east and west on the southern and northern areas, and with the grade separation because of the road tracks. So we can't even get funding for the grade separations. Is that correct? Or
so, if I may, I see that we have Brent on the line. He may be able to weigh in to some of the specifics with regards to transportation.
So I guess if your question is particularly about the grade separation, so we have applied for, it's called a CRISI grant for grade separation at 120th and US 85. I also believe that DRCOG has in their 2040 plan 104th Avenue as a grade separation at US 85. I mean, those projects are not funded, but we are going after grade separations in order to, I guess, eliminate the tracks as an impediment for our roadways.
But the 2K project was from the 2010 comprehensive plan, is that correct?
I'll let Roger.
No, that came later. The ballot issue was in 2013. It arose out of a long-range financial plan that had been put together and then updated with the Citizens Advisory Committee that was involved. And so it sort of, I guess, it wasn't done in isolation from the comprehensive plan, but it was not part of the comprehensive plan. It didn't wasn't directly related, if you will. So I don't see those as linked, quite honestly.
Okay. All right, thank you.
If I may add, council member, and Brent, maybe you can speak to this, but obviously the comp plan also has a very strong influence on, I'll say, public works opportunity to be able to go after grant opportunities as well, because there's I'll say, a more defined path of how we envision it and the impacts associated. And once again, going back to that transportation investment and funding, can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So just a little bit. So when we apply for these bigger grants, they usually ask us if it's part of a plan, right? And so some of these projects are not part of our current transportation plan. So it would be nice to update the plan and I guess add a lot of these projects into the transportation plan. So when we apply for these grants, we can say, yes, it's in our transportation plan and it's part of our future network that we're looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Hurst.
Yeah, I was pretty involved in the statewide transportation plan recently, and I understand how much work it takes. The statewide obviously is with 62 or 64 counties, can't remember which one. So it's a lot of work, and now we're in COVID, and obviously we're making on the fly adjustments. And so I understand those concerns. But for the other side of it, for me, why I think it's important that we do move forward is understanding where the money's coming from. Again, as Councilman Madera pointed out, the money sources cannot be used for some of the other issues that we're addressing right now. And so it's budgeted that way, and it makes sense to continue forward with it. But for me, it really helps us market our city and where we're going in the next 10 years. And as Director Rogers pointed out, yes, our 10 years ago, we haven't been perfect in completing that plan. But also, as Councilman Madera said, a lot has changed in those 10 years. And some of the reasons why we weren't able to complete the 2010 plan or completely be successful there are because of those changes that have happened in the last 10 years. Different markets, different events that are out of our control have changed our ability to deliver on some of those. And so I think this will really help market our city for where we want to see it go now in the next 10 years. And considering the current situation, looking for city manager, however that may come, the census, new numbers from the census, a major potential investment from the federal and state government coming out of the COVID-19 crisis. It's really good for us to be prepared for those things and kind of have a plan on those investments that may have a major impact on our transportation network, may have a major impact on the layout of our city, or could have a major impact on our partner/neighbor agencies. I know the airport was already called out, but E470 also has a 10-year plan. Can we make sure we get the proper interchanges built in alignment with development in Commerce City? Can we get an interchange built at 104th or 88th or 96th Avenue onto E470? Those things matter because we're competing against 7 other entities at E470 as well. And so having a good solid 10-year plan for us to fall back on and kind of put that in the forefront of an agency like E470 or some of our partnering, neighboring communities, whether we can work on improvements for transportation between Brighton and Commerce City, or between Aurora and North Denver and Commerce City, that would be, a good place for us to start, where we can take these back to DRCOG and some of the other regional groups that focus on transportation and other assets of community development. I really think this is where, $717,000 is a lot of money. It's also the cheapest I've ever heard for a comp plan for a city our size. And so I think it's a good deal. especially if the RFP process was vetted as was laid out for us. Very much think that the timing is awkward, but I think if we invest in it now, it's really going to pay off and prepare us for the other side of COVID-19 when government reinvestment into our communities happens, and we are prepared to move forward with some of these what used to be maybe pie in the sky dreams are becoming more of a reality as our city grows and that funding opportunities come with investments.
Councilwoman Noble.
I would hope that at a minimum, the service agreement can be worked on so that there is more emphasis on community engagement as opposed to staff. I think it's very critical for the people who live here to be helped determining the future. And that is in the service agreement. So it would be useful if that was the case, because I look back on the audit from 2010, and one of the items was greenhouse gas emissions reduced. Another was a sustainability plan, neither of which Commerce City accomplished in the past 10 years, and think where we'd be today if we had done those. And they were part of the comprehensive plan or the general plan. So I think that they're incredibly important to do, but people need to remember that they actually need to be utilized. You need to make it part of the fabric of the community, and it needs to be developed by the community itself. So if we see this go through, then I, for one, will be watching like a hawk to make sure that decisions that were made as a result of this are incorporated into the decisions that are made on all levels of government. But first of all, it needs to have far more citizen involvement in determining the direction of the comprehensive plan and the associated plans that it does, because that's the way it's done in communities across the country. And I have been, as I mentioned, a participant in this and have been schooled by some of the best planners on this kind of stuff around the country. So I hope that we can take another look at this before moving totally forward with it.
Thank you. Any other comments for staff on this? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next presentation, which is CDPHE air monitoring. Dylan, can you please move all the panelists over? And Dominic Martinelli, will you please introduce members of CDPHE and make your presentation?
Yes, sir. Give me just one moment to get everybody switched over.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. I'm going to be introducing our presentation tonight. There's been some preliminary initial discussions regarding additional air monitoring that would occur generally within the southwest area of Commerce City to potentially assess different types of greenhouse gas emissions, VOCs, and a number of other items that are generally within the industrial areas of Commerce City. I have three presenters tonight that are going to be covering the topics in sort of this initial assessment in more in depth. So we're going to have Daniel Bond, Sean Hackett, and Tara Webster. And I will go ahead and turn it over to Daniel now to start the presentation. Daniel, looks like you just jumped on. We'll go ahead and turn it over to you if you want to share your screen and run the presentation.
Sure. Sorry, I was on and then it suddenly cut me off as soon as you transferred over to me. So I'm not sure what went on there, but I am working on sharing the presentation now. Let's see. Share screen, there we go. All right, can you see my slides?
Daniel, we cannot. No.
You cannot. Okay, let me try it again.
There we go.
Okay. Great. Well, I'm Daniel Bond. I work for the Air Pollution Control Division at CDPHE. And I have a presentation about some of the air monitoring that we're hoping to conduct in the North Denver and Commerce City area in the next couple of years. And this would be a collaborative program that we're a part of that's with our environmental toxicology office, environmental epidemiology. And really, we would be looking for partners, not just Commerce City, but Denver and Adams County and Tri-County Health and CDOT all have been a part of the process. So are you seeing, do you see the next slide when did it advance there?
Yes, it is. It looks like we can see your whole desktop, Daniel. I don't know if you want to make your presentation full screen or not.
Like that?
There we go. Yep, that's perfect.
Okay, great. Some technical difficulties getting started here, but okay, so that was just the title slide. Moving forward, I'm not the person to talk to specifically about health effects, but this is a slide that they often show that kind of looks at, in this case, oil and gas operations, moving from source to emissions to the concentration in the environment to exposure pathways that would include air, water, food, liquids, and things like that, to the dose, and then health effects. And so this is a framework for looking at epidemiological studies, and then what we have been doing with our program related to oil and gas along the Front Range has been kind of that screening level risk assessment where we look at air concentrations and exposure, dose, and then health effects, and we rate investigations that kind of cover that part of that process for air only. So our program is the Oil and Gas Health Information Response Program. It was kind of put together after the governor's task force a few years back under Governor Hickenlooper. It's a collaborative program between our Office of Toxicology and Environmental Epidemiology Office and the Air Pollution Control Division. It was created to address oil and gas health-related complaints. The toxicology team wrote a risk assessment for the state. It was entitled the Human Health and Risk Assessment for Oil and Gas Operations in Colorado. And that went into a version that was peer reviewed. In that document, they set guideline values based on searching the literature for a bunch of common volatile organic compounds that are associated with oil and gas development, some of which you can see on this table. If we look at the top line there, benzene is probably the most common driver of health adverse outcomes in Colorado, partly because its health guideline value there, you can see in a short term, 1 hour exposure is only 9 parts per billion. It's long term, so kind of 30-year to lifetime is more like 4 parts per billion. So we set out to kind of look at what kind of exposures we were seeing in the general population near oil and gas operations. We've been operating since 2017, basically kind of plopping down our monitoring between oil and gas operations and people's homes. So, and you can see one other thing in this table that I wanted to point out is that, for benzene in particular, in this case, the short-term guideline is 9. The odor threshold is out at 470. So you can't smell benzene at values where we have some concern. That's not to say that these values, these are not standards, these are not enforceable standards. These are just guideline values that we have set as a state that kind of indicate to us that more thorough studies need to be kind of enlisted to understand the problem better and really understand why the emissions are getting that high in the first place. Out of our community investigations, you'll get a table like this. The health guideline value is divided into the air measurement concentration to kind of normalize it. So we call that a hazard quotient. And you can see all the way over on the left, and it's kind of small there, but benzene was, in this particular study, its value in the air was fairly close to its health guideline value. When those are identical, you get a 1 on this chart, or 10 to the 0. So you can see benzene was the closest to its guideline value. All the other compounds that we measured, volatile organic compounds that we measured in this case, were below that. And then we did a summary on the right. So our toxicology team works with the Air Pollution Control Division to write risk assessments and present results like this from the numbers that we capture through air analyses. I did a quick poll of our database to give you a little bit of background. Most of you probably know this area quite a bit better than I do, although I'm getting to know it better as I prepare for things like this. If we look at existing permitted sources in the area surrounding the refinery, North Denver and Commerce City, you can see that there's only a couple of large NOx sources that are permitted in our database at CDPHE, but those are over 700 tons per year of NOx. When we look at VOCs, you know, there's quite a few of them that are 100 tons, and then a couple that are up into the 600 ton kind of range in the area. So the area, as you know, has a lot of activity, industrial activity, a refinery, a water treatment facility, the generating station. And again, we're talking about a broad area, not necessarily confined to Commerce City limits here, but then we've got the 270 and the 70 highways to the south, and several major, like Highway 85 and places like that. So there's a lot of potential sources of emissions and known sources of emissions. When we look at the monitoring that is existing now, up to the north, APCD has a couple of sites at Adams County and Welby, and a little bit to the south and west, we've got Globeville and La Casa, but there's a big gap kind of centered around the refinery where there's not a lot of monitoring. CDOT has started adding some monitors along the I-70 corridor there, and it sounds like from what I've been hearing from John Putnam that there's some planned possibly along 270 as well. And then DDPHE has the Love My Air program, which is operating in North Denver, a lot of Denver, but we have recently also expanded that. CDPHE is funding some additional sites at Commerce City, which is PM monitors, particulate matter monitors at schools. And so we're kind of expanding that in conjunction with DDPHE, who's running that program, up into Commerce City as well. So again, what we're really going for here is kind of just an enhanced monitoring presence in this area that has been underrepresented in terms of environmental, from the air side especially. We've got kind of 3 tools in our pocket with the air monitoring. I'll just briefly cover this. It's getting late this evening. So we've got screening level measurements, which are kind of self-contained on a tripod and run by solar power. We've got the reference grade. That's kind of the mobile lab that I'll talk more about. I'll show you a slide on that in a minute. And that measures VOCs the same way that you would measure them in a lab setting. And then we've got a new technology that we're just in the process of finalizing, commissioning a new van that, again, I'll just give you a real brief overview of those 3 tools that APCD can bring to the table. But what we're hoping to get out of this as a department is multi-jurisdictional collaborative data. So, we have reached out to CDOT and DDPHE and Tri-County Health and Adams County and Commerce City. And we're hoping to get, because there's so many jurisdictions in there, kind of develop a way to collaborate and share data, hopefully through a shared data platform that we would like to build based on kind of Denver's model for Love My Air. We want to pool toxicological and communication efforts with the public. CDPHE and the OGHIR program have a lot of experience in communicating this and helping, Broomfield and Greeley schools and things like that, with their communication plans around air pollution and understanding what we do and don't know about air pollution. And then, I think the goal overall is to develop an ongoing monitoring presence in this area that has kind of been, I won't say overlooked, but because of the multi-jurisdictional area, it's been difficult to get monitors into this area for air. So I'll just give you a really brief overview of those tools. Again, because we're getting late, if you have additional questions, I'm happy to answer them. But the Colorado Air Monitoring Mobile Lab is kind of the lab that I operate that has the 1 hour VOC measurements that we use to kind of represent a human exposure to those VOCs. Most of the health studies are based on 1 hour studies. You expose a rat to a concentration, you can't do it for 5 seconds and then expect to see effects. So we do a 1 hour measurement to compare with those studies of those VOCs. We also operate as kind of a shelter that would be similar in size and scope to one of our monitors, like at Globeville or at Welby, where we'd have ozone and nitrogen oxide and other measurements, particulate measurements that would be, reference grade, federal reference grade measurements. So, we can move this trailer around and plop it down. We can run it on generator, although that's not ideal. Line power is much cleaner. And, when I run a diesel generator, I'm generating a lot of the same pollutants that I am measuring. So it certainly creates, confounds the data, I'll just say. So anyway, that's our main tool. And I'll talk about where and when we're trying to get that deployed at the end here. And I'll skip over some of the technical detail slides. Again, if you have more questions, I'm happy to talk to you offline or after this presentation. Then we've got these screening level sensors. These are basically small sensors that are low enough power that they can be powered by a solar panel. They can be set out almost anywhere because they don't have to be hooked into the grid. They have meteorology. They feed their data online via a cellular connection. And we have about half a dozen of those at CDPHE. DDPHE has some very similar technology that they're starting to deploy. And again, I'll show you that towards the end here. But they have what's called on board a photoionization detector. And so this is a screening tool. The photoionization detector kind of gives you an idea of what the total amount of VOC in the air is without being very specific about what VOCs are there. As you may or may not know, a lot of VOCs are not particularly toxic. Some are much worse to breathe in. The PID doesn't really tell you what is in the air, but it does say, hey, there's a lot of VOCs, or hey, this is an average day, or hey, we're getting a really clean day with air blowing over the mountains, and we're seeing really clean, air from out west. It's really good at that. In addition, we have been adding this capability lately to be able to trigger canisters. So on the lower left, there's a couple of canisters that we can hook up to one of these S-Pods and grab a sample. And these then have to be sent out to a lab and analyzed. That can take several weeks, but we get that reference grade measurement that would be similar to what we get with the mobile lab. in a single grab sample. So we can kind of wait until the VOCs get to a high enough level to trigger a can, and then we can collect that can at just the right time and send that out to a lab and get a result that's similar to what the Camel can do, all from a tripod that's solar powered. So we can also use sorbent tubes. The functional difference there is that we can do a wider variety of analytes. We could look at sulfur compounds or chlorinated compounds, for example, with the sorbent tubes. So we have the option on some of our SPOD rigs to attach these additional sampling mechanisms, but they're really good at putting them out in remote places where we don't have power and operating and then feeding the data into online database instantaneously. This is the kind of dashboard we get. So these SPODs, if you'll look at the plot with the signal, you can see that the signal's going between 50 and 100. That's a pretty normal day where you have this variability due to temperature and RH. These things are not perfectly accurate in under those kind of conditions. They do move around with temperature and RH, but generally that variability is small. And then when something comes along where you get a peak of a plume of VOCs moving through, you'll get a significant peak on there. And at some of our other sites, we've seen peaks up into the 7,000 range. This is a relatively small peak in this particular case that I've shown here, but this is the kind of dashboard that we would be integrating into Denver's Love My Air kind of platform, where that would be, unlike with the Camel, where the data takes a while to work up and quality control afterward, and it's not available immediately. These PIDs do provide that kind of instantaneous feedback and ability to data share, as well as trigger those canisters. We can also do with these SPODs is we can place them out kind of scouting to assess wind direction and do kind of heat maps. Where are these plumes coming from? Are they mostly coming from the north? Are they coming from north and west, or what? So they're super useful tools. They don't give us detailed information about what's in the air, but they do say there's a lot of stuff in the air or not, and what direction is it coming from. So super useful as screening tools. I'll just touch on this super briefly. We're looking at this van that we are purchasing with some of the settlement funds from the Firestone tragedy that happened a few years back. And we are customizing, ordering a custom van that will be able to use the sun as a light source and get an entire column. So in the picture that you see there, the plume from the refinery is going over the van, but the van is using the sun as a light source, and it can see that plume. And by circling the refinery, we can actually estimate emissions from that refinery just by circling it when the wind is steady and pretty well characterized. So it's an advanced tool. We expect that to be delivered kind of middle of next year. We wouldn't be able to start with that. And that's just the second one to show you the kind of things we can do with this new van that we're getting at CDPHE next year. So kind of what we're proposing, we've scouted out and done some discussion with different local government groups down in the south, DDPHE at the Swansea neighborhood park there. They have already placed their analogs to the SPODs with the PID sensors in there. They did that late last week. And they are starting to work on getting us power for the Camel to run there. With Excel, they're expecting that to take 2 to 6 months to get that power installed for us to run the Camel there. But then they will move, next week, they will move one of their small sensors over to the impound lot, which is the other red dot that you're seeing there. And then we'll have kind of a presence initially on these sensors, looking at what kind of plumes we might see in that area. To the north, to the west, we're still seeking a location. We haven't identified any locations out to the west that are likely to be able to put one of these sensors, but we're looking into it. We have been talking with Commerce City employees about putting one along the walkway there north of the refinery, kind of along that walking path. And then we have started talking about a water tower just kind of to north of the refinery there. That is a potential site where I think we have done some at least sensor-based PM particulate matter monitoring before. And then over to the right, to the east, that blue dot is the Eagle Point Rec Center, which was kind of proposed by Dominic as a potential location, second location for the Camel. And the idea would be that we could bring the Camel there, we could take it to the Swansea Neighborhood Park and kind of fit it into our rotation if we were able to get the power installed at that location. And again, we're not necessarily targeting the refinery or any one source, but we're kind of trying to go to where people live and work with the Camel Mobile Lab to kind of get an idea of what the overall exposure is, right? We don't necessarily care if that's, you know, about the individual pieces, but the overall is what we're trying to get a handle on in the area, initially at least. And so that kind of brings me to the timeline. And this is just proposed at this point. You know, we'd like to put out some of these scout sensors, these SPODs, as soon as possible, as soon as we can get agreements worked out. Again, Denver has one, 2 of them already at Swansea Neighborhood Park. We have been working with the legal teams between CDPHE and Commerce City about getting a permit for along that walking path there. So we're ready to put those out as soon as we have those agreements finalized, and start scouting that, just kind of looking for plumes and looking to see what we see and understanding the wind patterns through there. You know, the moving the Camel in, DDPHE did just start talking to Excel. They have a plan for getting power to that neighborhood park. We'd like to get those discussions going at the Eagle Point Rec Center, because, you know, putting in, it's basically enough power almost to power a house that we need for all of our analyzers and our air conditions to keep everything, you know, at a stable temperature and all that. But you know, we have availability with the, you know, the Camel normally goes out and is operating near well pads along the Front Range, but with the reduction in drilling with COVID and all that, you know, until that heats back up, we still do have quite a open calendar, a lot of openings in there. What we would kind of propose is 3 to 4 week periods at each of those, kind of all next year and the following year, kind of coming and going as we have other calls for the use of the lab, you know, up in Greeley or if drilling heats back up. But I would think we would try to get over those 2 years, you know, 3 to 4 deployments at each location for 3 to 4 weeks each. That's kind of what we're committing to. And by no means am I saying we're going to stop after December 2022, but that's kind of our initial plan, is to do a couple of years, you know, in 3 to 4 week chunks at each of those locations if we can get power there. And then when the new van comes in, say next summer, it will probably be a big testing ground for the technology for us to be moving around in those neighborhoods in 1 week periods at a time, kind of characterizing individual sources and looking at what we're seeing with that tool as well. So that's kind of what we're hoping. Again, we want this to be a collaborative effort. We want this to be moving towards more air monitoring and a bigger presence of air monitoring in the North Denver and Commerce City area, in the neighborhoods there, and really get a handle on trying to understand what people are exposed to in these areas. So I'll kind of finish up with just some contact information. You guys all have in your packet, you know, this slide deck, so you can reach out to myself or Christy Richardson or John Putnam, or any of us at CDPHE that do air monitoring, and ask follow-up questions at any time. And that's what I had for tonight.
Thank you for all that. Anyone on council have any questions for CDPHE? Councilwoman Noble.
Thank you, Dr. Bond. I am thrilled that you're coming to Commerce City. As you pointed out, it was long overdue, but I don't want to emphasize that. But thank you so much for coming. It's very much appreciated. I would like to suggest for your consideration Monaco Park, which is a city park. There are a lot of residents in that area who say that they are suffering health issues. And so I think that might be an interesting spot for you to hit also. And I wondered if you would consider having the vehicle in North Commerce City for a period of time as sort of a baseline, and also to see just how far those emissions travel, and whether with the oil and gas that's in the area that's plugged, abandoned, shut in, whatever the case might be, whether there's any effects from that and across E470, where there are several oil and gas sites just from the folks who live in the north. But it might be kind of interesting scientifically to compare and to have some sort of I don't know what you would call it. I'm not so good at science. X factor that you could use to compare and use for information. It could help us a lot also. Thank you, Dr. Bond.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I really appreciate the comments there and the support. I think, you know, initially we're trying to get one site powered, and again, we haven't completely defined the scope of this. The Camel in particular is limited really to places where we can get power installed, and then what we've done, our model in the past at Broomfield and in Greeley is that the local governments will help us get the power installed, and then, you know, we provide the data and the expertise and the toxicological assessments and things like that, kind of, you know, to follow up on that investment. So, you know, we have identified the Eagle Point initially. If you have other ideas, we would certainly be open to discussing other ideas to kind of flesh this out. And, you know, we want to get, again, I think we hope to build a monitoring presence in the area, either through some of the different agencies that have jurisdiction here, or whether we bring that in. We do have ozone monitoring sites and PM monitoring sites just to the north, though these VOC sites are, you know, quite a bit fewer and far between. There is a, down in Swansea Elementary School, there is a Denver run VOC GC, and we have just been recently given access to that data as well. So again, just kind of looking at exposures, potential exposures, and moving it around and assessing what's there. And I think a lot of the future stuff will grow out of what we find in these initial rounds.
Thank you very much. And perhaps I'll talk to staff and see if they would consider that, because those are known incidents, health incidents, and might be useful in that area.
Yeah, Tara Webster, who's on the call here, she mans our health information call line, and really is a very valuable resource for. It's where we handle a lot of our complaints, our health complaints, and we track things. And so it's important in this area in particular, I think, because there are so many jurisdictions and there's so much confusion about who to call, that information gets forwarded to us. So we're hearing that as well. And we do track anything that is forwarded to us, but we have had municipalities in the past that, you know, have kind of held on if the citizens call the fire department or whatever, and that stuff doesn't make it to us. And it's a little harder for us to make decisions if we're not hearing those complaints, I guess.
Really great advice. We'll take your name, Tara, and Ms. Webster, and also Dr. Webster, and also the contact information. That's great. We'll share it.
Councilmember Madera?
Yes, you mentioned that you placed these around a lot of drilling sites. What have you seen over there? Because we've noticed an increase in interest in the city in regards to oil and gas, and it's kind of a lot of unknowns for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So we have been mostly focused so far on, exploration. So drilling, fracking, completions, and then installation of permanent equipment to harvest that oil, right? And so we have really been largely focused on that. And those sites are characterized by very process-dependent emissions, very intermittent. We don't see high levels all the time. What we do see is infrequent spikes to higher levels. The only time we have seen something, for example, for benzene that went over our health guideline values was up in Greeley at the Bella Romero School that you've probably seen in the news. That's the only one we've seen in the state in 3 years of monitoring. That's the single highest value of benzene we got for a 1 hour. We've been operating for several years in Broomfield and kind of Erie, that Front Range corridor along I-36. And really what we see is a lot of time when there's not much coming out of those facilities, and then a spike that comes out of the blue. They vent a tank or whatever when the wind is just right and it moves our way. So that's pretty typical. From what I understand, the company that is building us this extra van that we're bringing in developed the technology around refineries in Europe and worked extensively in Texas, in Houston around the refineries there, and they kind of specialize that. This particular van is actually quite well suited to look at big sources like that. And so we do hope to do some of our initial testing at that facility there, just to kind of look at what's really coming out and what we can identify. Again, none of these tools will see everything, right? We are never 100% sure that our analytical breadth is deep enough to catch every possible contaminant, but we can get a good idea with these combination of tools, and we can do kind of special studies. If we have power for the camel, we can plug in for a couple of days and do a PAH sample, or we can expand our monitoring into sulfur compounds for a canister grab or something like that. And when we have a place where the camel can come and go, we can do intensives to look for other things that we might not expect otherwise. So we've got a good way to kind of broaden what we can do. But we do need those couple of base locations for the camel where we have power, where we have permission to come and go, by arrangement, of course, not just whenever we feel like it. But it's a pretty powerful suite of tools and really quite innovative, I think, for anywhere in the country. They have some similar tools in California, but most states don't have these kind of tools. So I think, it's pretty neat to get them out there and be at the forefront of getting these things used and collecting this data really for the first time. A lot of efforts in the past are looking at longer term, 24-hour and 2-week exposures. We're really trying to hone in on these 1 hour and sub 24-hour kind of exposures that really have been hard to get otherwise.
Well, I live in the neighborhood closest to the refinery, so if you need somewhere to park the camel, I'll bring my home to you guys.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you send us the location, we would seriously consider it. We would need a couple of 240 circuits and things like that. But we have parked on private property before with the permission of landowners and for people who've gotten us power and things like that. So it's not out of the question. We thought we would reach out to the local governments first to look for assistance and suggested sites. But really anything's on the table. If there's a business that wants to host an SPOT on their roof, or a utility shed somewhere that somebody could offer, or somebody's got a 240 service in their garage that we could easily fit, we will consider those options as well.
Okay, yeah, I'll pass along my information.
Thank you.
And then this is Sean Hackett, the CDPHE Energy Liaison. If I could just add one quick point to Dan's presentation. Well, first, thanks, Dan, for the great presentation. And then also just wanted to flag that all of the investigation results, the community investigation results, are available on the CDPHE Oil and Gas Health Information Response Program website. And I think Dan provided that website in his presentation, but that is www.colorado.gov/OGHealth. And you can find all of our community investigations as well as the comprehensive health risk assessment that was released last year.
Councilman Hurst.
Yeah, thanks guys for the presentation. It was a very good one. I had a question about some recent information that we've received about new potential air quality monitoring systems that are fixed. They're not movable, but they are kind of sold to us as they have the ability to monitor air quality either around an active drilling site or maybe somewhere like a refinery. And then there's, of course, a subscription fee for the data. But from your professional opinion, is the technology there for a local municipality like us to invest in that type of equipment so we can, maybe contract out environmental service positions so we can do evaluations and then make decisions based off of that type of equipment's air quality assessments?
I think that's an excellent question. And it's not a super straightforward answer. There are companies that have gotten experience. I would say that what's going on in Broomfield is a model for what can be done. They hired a private research firm that put into automatic GCs and are working with CSU to collect canisters, but they also put out a network of small sensors that's being managed by another private company. And they are getting some valuable data on that. Again, I think you want to think about the scale of things when you do that. You can certainly measure a lot of the parameters that we measure as a state, but it kind of misses the point. Many of the pollutants that we're measuring as a state that are federally mandated are regional pollutants. And so being right up close to a source doesn't necessarily tell you a lot of useful information. So you really want to be careful about balancing that and making sure that your goals for what you want measured match up to the situation that you're trying to monitor in, right? And so I think that is also a lesson that was learned in Broomfield. Ozone is not necessarily formed close enough to any oil and gas rig to pin it on that oil and gas rig. But, if you're looking at, benzene, short-term exposure to benzene, that's a much more pertinent relative measurement for that environment. So I know Aurora is working on some stuff like this with oil and gas monitoring. So I don't want to say that these companies, some of them know what they're doing. And as long as you know what you're getting, I think that can be a good investment. But we're also here, our services are, since we represent all the people of Colorado, we want to get out there and we want to be measuring and we want to help the most people possible. And we want to lend our expertise. We have helped a number of local government, put out RFPs and define what they're looking for. And we're happy to help in that capacity as advisors as well. In Aurora, for example, they ended up selecting a contractor that had a lot of experience out of the East Coast over some local contractors because it was clear that they could probably do a better job of assessing oil and gas than the locals could. So again, we're happy to help in that process. And you just need to reach out to us and ask if you really are thinking about doing stuff like that. And I would say also that one of the goals we're trying to get out of this is kind of helping you figure out what monitoring would be most useful, right? This is a situation that is very unlike a drilling operation. What's going on with all the heavy industry in the area. It's a little bit different situation, and there's a lot more unknowns, really.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that question was important for me is because we're working on our land development codes, and we're pretty close to getting to the point of being able to vote on them. And, you know, one of our requirements will be continuous air monitoring systems, and really wanted to understand, or obviously this question can be extended to another date, but understand, you know, the technology that's out there and what the value is for having continuous air quality monitoring for the life of the well, even beyond production. And so there seems to be developing technology, and I just want to make sure we're on the forefront of that and understand what's going on there.
Yeah, there is, the technology is improving very rapidly. Right now, the small sensors, you know, they give you a lot of information really quickly. They're not as ground truth as what you would want for making really deep policy decisions that affect a lot of people. They're more, hey, is it high, is it low? Kind of like that PID that I was talking about that we're using. It's really good as a screening tool to indicate that we need to get the camel there or other monitoring in place. A lot of the low cost sensors are that way. And one of the things about those is they measure fast, but you have to pay a real close attention to degradation over time. The fact that they're not all the same out of the box, that you can't really calibrate them. And so, you know, you have to do a lot of quality control and comparison and testing to make up for the fact that they can't be calibrated or really adjusted, and that they degrade over time. Again, stuff is getting better. The best inexpensive sensor right now is PM, the particulate matter. Those do a really good job. Again, Michael Ogletree at Denver has really gotten those into schools and really is doing that to lead forward educational efforts and understanding and getting kids engaged in being aware of air pollution. And, you know, some of the schools fly flags of different colors on different air quality alert days. And I mean, that's a tremendous program. But those smaller sensors do have some limits. And as long as you're aware of what you're getting and you think that's the right tool for the job, I think that's great. We are also doing rulemaking around new development statewide for new wells that will require most likely monitoring at a state level on new developments. So, you know, again, I wouldn't want you to go down the path of paying for something at a local government that's already required for the state at a state level for every new well.
And Councilmember Hurst, I do want to kind of weigh in there a little bit as regards to the land development code updates, since you mentioned them. I did want to just kind of point out that given all the items that Daniel referenced, the Air Quality Control Commission rulemaking and some of these other items, we have been working closely with a lot of these individuals. We've been working pretty closely with Sean, who's a panelist on this call, in terms of going back and forth through our stakeholder process for the oil and gas LDC updates, getting some feedback from the Denver Air Quality Division and some of those other folks to help answer some of those questions and ensure that the regulations that we put forth reflect a lot of the discussion that we've been hearing tonight about what's practically feasible, what are we looking for, what are we trying to attain as a local government in our air quality monitoring efforts. So.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it.
Councilwoman Allen Thomas.
Yes, I just wanted to thank all of you for your presentation tonight. I think it's outstanding what you guys are doing, and it's well overdue. I've been in Commerce City all my life, and I live approximately 2 to 3 miles from the refinery. So, you know, and I'm also in the medical professional. I'm a family nurse practitioner, so I witnessed and have seen and continue to see the effects on the residents and the environment. So I just wanted to really thank you for your work. But one question in particular, well, one question I had is that I'm curious, is Denver receiving any money because of the North Denver area situation? And if so, are they helping with any monitoring in that location?
I'm not sure exactly which situation you're referring to.
Well, I get how that the Swansea area, are they assisting with money as well for the monitoring material?
I know they have been talking a lot with CDOT, and they have been, really instrumental in putting those monitors at the Swansea Elementary School. They have gotten loaner equipment from EPA. That VOC, instrument that they operate there is on semi-permanent loan from EPA. So they are certainly getting some federal, at least cooperation on that. I can't really speak to what other money is coming into Denver in particular. The grant that Michael Ogletree started Love My Air with, I believe, was a Bloomberg grant that DDPHE, kind of supported him in applying for and jump-started that. So certainly there's external money that they've applied for that I'm aware of, and probably more than what I'm aware of. I think they do have an air toxics grant application in with CDPHE this year to study the North Denver area to some extent, and I haven't heard if they've heard on that yet. But again, that is all stuff that is public knowledge and certainly would help their efforts. That would also be, I think, in a lot of cases, available to any municipality that applied for it.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you for all you guys' hard work, and like I said, it's long overdue. So thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, we're really hoping to kind of innovate when a lot of the monitoring in the past has focused at long-term exposures. We're trying to get under there and say, hey, we know that some of this short-term exposure does have an effect, and really getting into that problem and trying to find ways to show that those short-term exposures do have meaning is really where we're trying to innovate, I think.
All right, thanks again.
Councilwoman Noble.
One last question, Dr. Bond, from me. What will be the repercussions on the work that you're doing if, as anticipated, the EPA rolls back all methane rules this week?
Well, there's an election coming up, and methane rules come and methane rules go. We've still got state rules for methane that are actually the model that a lot of the federal ones were based on. So I don't anticipate a slight rollback of federal rules affecting us with our state laws. We've got, progressive and supportive legislature and governor who has really put an effort, a huge priority on air quality. I think we are going to charge ahead as long as we have the support to do this. And, we're doing it with science. We're letting science guide us. We're not activists. We want to get representative data. We want to be rigorous, and we want to do the best we can to be neutral. And sometimes we fall in the middle. People want us to say things more strongly than we can, and we're not comfortable with that either. So, we are in the middle, and I don't anticipate any reduction over the next few years in any of these efforts.
I will also just add, from a health perspective and a toxicity perspective, we're still focused on identifying and measuring and assessing the contaminants that could pose, the greatest health risks. And so that's kind of independent of what specific regulations there are based on those compounds. We still want to assess those and understand, what people are breathing, kind of regardless of those regulations.
Thank you both.
Okay, thank you again for your presentation. Look forward to seeing this program rolled out whenever you get it ready. Next on the presentation.
Council members, have a good evening.
You too. Next on the presentation is a presentation by Republic Services. Will the city clerk please move all the panelists over, and will Joe Wilson, Director of Public Works, please introduce members of Republic Services to make the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Presentation by Republic Services is in response to a lot of questions, comments, and concerns that council members have had regarding the level of service and or deficiencies with respect to level of service, in particular on potentially some specific routes. Those are either by council's direct observation, communication with residents, and or social media. So this evening, the Republic Services team led by Mark Petrovich, Manuel, Manny, and I believe Jennifer are here as well. They're going to kind of walk through the major program elements of the program with respect to recycling and trash for Commerce City, review the service statistic and metrics, the operation processes and procedures, what's being done with respect to quality control and customer service efforts, customer responsibilities, and then next steps to improve different processes and level of services. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mark Petrovich. And Mark, please feel free to introduce the members of your team that are joining you this evening, and then start your presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Joe. Good evening, Mayor, City Council. My name is Mark Petrovich, and I'm with Republic Services, and I am joined this evening with Manny Gomez, who is our General Manager of our hauling division, and then also Jennifer Johnson, one of our route supervisors. So I will, it's been a long evening for you folks, so we'll just get started. Dylan, if we can pull the presentation up.
Yes, Mark, and whenever you and your team are ready for me to move on to the next slide, just go ahead and say so.
Okay, so we can go to the next slide. So to get started, we just want to go over what we're going to cover, and I'll echo Joe's comments. So we're going to talk about the Front Range Municipal Partners Republic Services has, the Commerce City program elements, the service statistics and metrics that we provide the city and also we use to monitor our own performance, operational processes and procedures, quality control, customer service, customer responsibilities, and then at that point, I'll turn it back over to Joe for some next steps and final comments. Next slide, please. Republic Services is a proud partner with 8 municipalities throughout the Front Range. Commerce City obviously is one, Edgewater, Greenwood Village, Lafayette, Louisville. So we do have 8 throughout the Front Range. We have one additional partner that is going to come on board, and that is scheduled to be starting in July of 21, and that would be the city of Arvada. They are converting from open market to a contracted system. All partner cities have dedicated trucks, dedicated drivers, and operational support staff. So any new partners coming on board, those new partners, when you put that process together, they all have dedicated vehicles that are purchased for that program, drivers are hired, and operational support staff is brought on board. So any new partners coming on will have no negative impacts to our existing partners. Next slide, please. Just wanted to go through and cover the Commerce City program elements, just so everyone's on board with what the program does provide and additional services that are available for residents. So all residents receive weekly trash, and they are also provided a 95-gallon trash container. Residents also are provided every other week recycle collection. And again, it's 95-gallon cart is included for that service. We do ask that all the residents have their carts out by 7 a.m. We do recommend putting them out the night before so they don't miss us coming by if they're one of the earlier stops. And we also ask that they leave the carts out till 7 p.m. just in case we're having a slow go of it or maybe a heavy day and we're running a little late. So those are the hours we ask people to have their material out. An important thing to recognize about the program in Commerce City is it is cart content only. So we do not accept additional bags outside of the can, nor do we pick up personal containers or competitor carts that may be put out for collection. We do offer an opt-out option, and what that means is residents can opt out of recycle and they can receive an additional 95-gallon trash cart in lieu of doing the recycle program. There are no fees or no additional charges to the resident to exercise this option. And as a point of interest, when we rolled this out around March, I think going off of memory, we had about 582 or it might have been 562 customers that did exercise that option to opt out of recycling. Residents have the option of getting additional trash and or recycle carts. This is a fee-based program. As you guys well know, Commerce City covers the cost of the basic program for the residents. But if they do want additional services, additional trash carts or recycle, that option is available. It's fee-based and it's billed directly to the resident on a quarterly or annual basis, whatever their preference may be. As part of the program, we offer bulk collection services. We do one free bulk item per quarter. And then we also have additional bulk services available at $15 per item billed to the customer. And Dylan, I erred on the side of reading my presentation and I forgot to ask you to go forward a slide. Oh, no, I think I'm on the right one. Okay. My bad. So again, bulk collection included in the program. Annual events, we do offer these as part of the program, no additional fees to the residents. We originally, for years, we've been doing 2 free landfill days per year, and that is with our Tower landfill being located in Commerce City. So that was a benefit we've provided for many, many years. When we took over the contract, we did add 2 more free landfill days. It's very well attended, and it also helps keep illegal dumping down to a minimum. So we do have 4 free landfill days per year, and I believe the next one is coming up in August 29th, if my memory serves me. We also have 4 leaf and branch drop-offs. That's where residents can bring their leaves and yard debris to A1 Organics that has a facility drop-off in an organic facility in Commerce City. So we partner with them for these 4 free drop-offs. Again, there are no additional fees to the residents. We can go forward a slide, Dylan. Wanted to show some of this information just to give a scope of the work that Republic does on a weekly and monthly basis. When we took over the program in January, there were 16,934 customers. As of July, there were 17,200. That actually, when this was put together, I did not have July's final numbers. We actually have 17,275. We're seeing about 50 new homes a month coming on. So to put that in perspective, when we touch 17,000 customers weekly, and we alternate weeks for recycle, so half of the city goes one week and half does recycle the other week. When you combine that on a month, our drivers touch just about 112,000 Commerce City customers every month. So that's how many drive-bys we're putting together monthly. You can see the statistics with the trash average tonnage we're collecting and recycle. We do run 4 trash routes on a daily basis, Monday through Friday. And we run 2 recycle routes. And the reason we only run 2 is we divided the city in half. So we do half of the residents on one week, and then the other week we do the other half. So they alternate on a every other week schedule. So there's 2 recycle routes running Monday through Friday. When we took this contract over, we did hire 6 full-time driver positions and also a full-time supervisor position as well. Next slide, please, Dylan. So want to put a little narrative to this slide because it's just a lot of numbers. So basically what I did is I put together the route number, which is on the far left, and it shows what waste stream we're picking up. And then the Monday through Friday numbers, that's how many drive-bys or touches or services a driver does per day. So for example, Route 622, that route runs all week. And the way we differentiate that route for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc., is the Monday route would be designated 1622. It would be 2622 for Tuesday, and then so on. And that's how we designate the routes by day. And that just gives you an idea what the drivers are doing. On the low end, we're doing in the high 700s, and in the high end, we're doing over 1100. So drivers are busy, they're very productive, and they're touching a lot of Commerce City residents every day and every week. Next slide, please. So I was working with Commerce City staff and also with our operational staff, and we're putting together an interactive Google map which shows the route maps, and it shows by day and by route. We are completed with that. We do have it ready to go. I do need to get with staff and kind of go through this process so we all understand what the numbers mean and what the colors mean and how it all works. But this is something that will be available once we get this vetted out to go look at by route, by day, and where everything's located. So it's a nice, useful tool that we put together with the direction and collaboration of staff. If we can go next slide, please. So Republic in our industry as a general rule is very metric driven. We have a lot of data and a lot of metrics that we use to analyze our business, analyze our productivity, analyze our customer service requirements and meeting metrics. So we are very data driven. Just to give you an idea of some of the metrics that we function and operate under, is 99.9% accuracy and on-time collection goal. That is a goal that we have locally. It's also a corporate goal for our missed pickups and the goal that we set to meet customers' expectations. We also have a goal of 100% anytime we're contacted by a resident with an inquiry or a concern or a problem. Our goal is a resolution within 24 to 48 hours. Right now, we are running a little over 90% on our customer contact resolution. Where we're falling a little off on that is when we get bulk requests. When a resident calls in a bulk request, those generally are running on about 3 to 4 days it takes us, depending on the volume of bulk requests that we have. So that's where that 10% is coming in, are the bulk requests are throwing that number a little down from the 100% goal. Part of the contract is required monthly reporting. So we provide this to city staff every month, and then 1 week, a couple days or so, a week after we provide that information to the city, we do get together for a Zoom call and we talk through the statistics and any concerns or problems or things that are going on. We do that every month. These reports have all the tonnage and the diversion, so all the commercial and residential trash and recycling that we're collecting. We do have weight tickets for all of it, for every disposal site that we go to. And it's also done by day and by route, so we can track that information. We also provide customer contact, customer complaint, and a resolution report. Internally, we call this an F2 report, and you can ask me why, but I don't know why we call it that. That's just what it's called. So we have worked, myself, Susan Roundy, and other leadership at our hauling, we have worked with Commerce City staff in collaboration to take that report and really get a little more granular with it. We're segmenting the calls from a general inquiry to maybe a service exception to where the customer's doing something wrong and we can't collect, to missed pickups for trash, to missed for recycle, to requests for deliveries of carts. We really track every call that comes in, and working with the collaboration and guidance from city staff, we were able to segment that. So the data we're providing is more useful, and it's faster for us to actually get to a root cause of a problem if we do have a service complaint. Also, every month we have an updated monthly house count. We provide that in increments of 25. And so again, you saw my statistics earlier. We've added quite a few homes since we started in January. If we can go to the next slide, please. So this accuracy on time collection, the 99.9 I just spoke about. Here, this table shows how we've performed starting in January through July. Now I will, there's a caveat to this, and when you look at January, February, and March, the missed pickup calls are quite high. That is very normal when you're going through a transition. When you're going from one hauler to another hauler, you tend to have people that maybe they had a service day change, their recycle week may have changed. So we're fielding a lot of calls in that regard. We also had, when we started the program, Republic went out and we were collecting the Republic carts. There were still quite a bit of waste management containers still on site. So we were fielding quite a few calls to service those containers, which ultimately we did come back for the first couple of months as we were working through those problems and those customers, reaching out to them, letting them know if they needed an additional cart, they can either opt out of recycle or they could pay for an additional cart, but that we could not continue to collect waste management or other competitors' containers. So you can see how it's scaled down month over month. In July, we were at 130 missed pickups. Now, part of that, the last step I talked about in collaboration with the city. At Republic, our corporate guidance is if a customer calls us because their driver's normally there at 8:15 in the morning, but it's 9 o'clock and they haven't seen us, if that customer calls us and we consider it a worry call, we count that against ourselves as a miss. And so as I get further into the presentation, we'll talk about how we're going to be looking at true misses, worry calls, customer error. So we want to vet that out to actually get to where we're at a true miss, just so where we are having misses, we can get with the drivers, coaching, getting things resolved, or maybe if it's a customer issue, we're communicating with the resident to get those issues resolved. So I have all the confidence in the world we'll be hitting the 99.99%, but this month we were at 99.88, so we're 2/100ths off. The slide on the bottom is the contact inquiry resolution. This essentially shows how many calls we take in an entire month. And that covers everything from someone calling of, do you observe Christmas holiday or 4th of July, or what is my recycle week, or what's my pickup day? General inquiries to residents ordering additional carts, maybe ordering a bulk service, calling in to file a complaint for a missed pickup. It encompasses everything. You can see the volume of the calls from January, which was the highest, of course, with a transition month, and then it is tapered down, ebbs and flows a little, but you can see in July, we fielded 1,792 calls overall. Next slide, please. Big piece of what we do, obviously, is operational. What residents see and their perception of Republic is what they see in front of their house, and that's our driver, and that's our operations. Our operations has a lot of processes and procedures that we adhere to, and so we're going to go through some of those through these next couple of slides to kind of talk about what we do as an industry and how we run our operations. So this first slide talks about what the drivers do and the supervisors do daily prior to launch, prior to getting in their truck and going out onto route. We do have safety tailgate meetings. We've adjusted those to have proper social distancing, so things have changed a little, but we still do carry on with these meetings. And the safety tailgate meetings are exactly that. It's a lot about safety. We talk about OSHA training that we go through monthly. We talk extensively about safety, as that's number one for our company over everything. Customer experience, obviously very, very important, right behind safety. And then productivity, that's a big piece. Productivity, if we're not productive and we're not getting our routes done, then that means customers are not getting service in a timely fashion. We also update the route sheets and maps we do provide to the drivers daily. We do have new homes being added. And even though those homes might not be added to billing to Commerce City at the end of the month, they still come in essentially daily. We get new homes added. And so drivers have to have these homes added to their route sheets. So we make sure those people are getting picked up. If we do have any drivers that potentially are on vacation, or maybe they have an injury or an illness, we do have relief drivers. Those are our most seasoned drivers and most tenured drivers. And they would be assigned to a route that would be open that day. And then the supervisor is briefing them on that route and then providing the routing information. Next slide, please. So a couple of things I wanted to explain that we experience when we're on the street. One of them is called a down route and a down route process. And what a down route means is we could have a driver get injured. We had a Commerce City driver a while back. He actually had heat stroke, and we had to get, I believe an ambulance came to get him or took him to the hospital, but he had a health issue. And so what happens when you have a down route is the route supervisor really gets into action at that point. If it's an injured driver, or if it's a maintenance issue, a maintenance department would be contacted to see if we can get that truck up and running. If it's an injury, well, then we're not going to go through that process. We are going to go through dispatch. We are going to communicate the route areas to other drivers that need support. The supervisor is going to create maps for the area that has not been serviced yet. So the helper drivers that are coming over aren't necessarily Commerce City drivers. They could be coming from other routes to help. And so they're getting maps and they're getting support in those areas by the supervisor. And then that supervisor is having a late duty that night because they are actually on site and they drive the affected areas to ensure that the route is complete and everything has been serviced. So that's down routes. Next slide, please. We have something else called a split route. And so sometimes this can happen if you have a driver, especially with COVID now, if we have a driver that's calling in because they have a fever, or they have some symptoms, or they have a family member, or any kind of other illness, then what happens is we don't have a driver coming in to do that route that day. And so then supervisors, again, are called into action, and they are going to have to split that route. They create maps, they section out areas that they assign to other drivers that are available to provide that kind of support. And again, the supervisor's on site to the affected areas, helping drivers get into the correct areas, that everything is completed, and then they are on site again to ensure successful completion of the route. And so I wanted to bring those two, the split route and the down route, just to your attention so you can understand there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that if a customer calls and complains because we're normally there at 2 in the afternoon and we don't show up till 5:30 that night, we very well could have had a down route for a mechanical or something, or a split route process is in process. So just want you aware of some of these things that we do behind the scenes to try to make everything run as smoothly as possible. Next slide, please. So missed pickup, all right, that's a hot topic. So missed pickup services do happen. If we are made aware of a missed pickup prior to 3 p.m., the recovery will be made by end of day. The driver is notified through via connect message. That's essentially just a radio that we can communicate with the driver. And the driver is provided the address of where the missed pickup call was phoned in. When the driver does go to the residence to recover this miss, they take a picture of the recovery before and after, or they take a picture of the container not being out. If we receive a missed pickup call after 3 p.m., the recovery is set for the following morning. The information is on the top of the driver's route sheet, so it's something that we collect first before they get onto their normal route. And again, drivers take pictures of recovery or materials not being out. When our drivers come in at the end of the day, they do check in and check out with dispatch. And essentially, they go through, did they have any accidents? Did they have any injuries? Was their route complete, or were there any stops that they could not get to? Vehicle condition report. Is there anything wrong? Do they have a headlight go out? Do they have a low tire? That condition report is put together. We have our own on-site fleet maintenance company, not company, but department, and they work 2 shifts. And so vehicles that come in with some sort of issue are worked on with our night shift and ready to go for our drivers by 7 a.m. the next morning. And the drivers also report any extra services or missed pickup recoveries that they have completed. So that is part of the operational process for the drivers and supervisors. Now, on the missed pickups, that's something that we take very seriously, and we work very hard to minimize the impact or any missed pickups for any customers, Commerce City or elsewhere. So we analyze all missed pickups that come in from the prior day. Again, our goal is to reduce missed pickups to 99.9% accuracy. And the supervisor's goal and role in analyzing and getting to the root cause of these misses is to ensure if we have any repetitive misses that are happening in the same neighborhood or the same addresses, to get to the root cause. Is it driver error? Did he not find the street? Was it blocked by construction? Is the missed pickup happening because the customer's trying to time it and they're not having their material out on time? When we see something happen over and over, there's a root cause and we need to get to the bottom of it. Whether it's on us or education for the customer, we need to find out the cause. Now, when we go through this process, part of what we're doing in collaboration with city staff is we're analyzing all the misses. We're vetting out the true misses where we had driver error, we failed to service that customer properly. We're also vetting out the worry calls. If we're not, people are creatures of habits, and with people being at home through COVID, if we're normally there by 9:20 every day and we're not, then people call because they're concerned. And then we also vet out and analyze the customer errors. So we are providing a lot of data for the city, and that's very helpful when we can vet that out and go through the process, because then maybe I get together with the public information and community outreach to where we do some more outreach to the residents about proper preparation of their materials, not having extra bags, having it out by 7 a.m. So it really helps us kind of get to the root cause of is it a communication issue? Is it a Republic issue, or where are we at in this process? Next slide, please. Can we go one more forward, Dylan, please? There we go. This is a snapshot of our example of our daily tracker. So you see on the far left, we have the date. We pulled this data from July 27th. So you have the date that the call came in, the customer's account number, the address, what it was, trash or recycle, or maybe a bulk miss, and what route that is tied to. So we are tracking these misses by route. And then we're putting in, was it a worry call? Was it a customer error? Or was it a true miss? And if it is a true miss, then why? So the information is the driver went down the wrong street, it was blocked, you didn't see it, whatever the issue may be. We're putting that in the why category, and we're analyzing that data and treating that as an educational and coaching opportunity for the driver. Next slide, please. So a couple areas, as I mentioned earlier, when we have repeated misses and repeated service issues, then we really need to have all hands on deck and figure out what is going on. And we have had a few of those areas in Commerce City. So in the Reunion area, we had numerous misses over, I think it was several weeks I was involved with this, that we continued to have misses, not necessarily on the same street, but on the same route and in the same Reunion area. So we were doing quite a bit of coaching with that driver, and then ultimately that driver is currently off that route and going through a process of being going through the education process of our processes and our route procedures and going through that training. This driver will be back on route. We just needed to get them up to speed and get to a point to where we stopped having continued calls. And this reunion area was prompting a lot of calls to the Commerce City staff, as well as Commerce City leadership, mayor, and council members. So that was a problem that we have addressed, and I believe we are running smoothly in that area to my knowledge. Niagara Street, we had 20 missed recycle stops on one day, and it was all on the west side of the street. So we actually were notified, I'm going off of memory, but I think it was either a Thursday or Friday service. We were notified of this, and we did come back on a Sunday and recover all these misses. Now, we got to the root cause of this, and we determined how it happened. It was driver error. The driver's recycle truck was full. It was packed out, as we call it. And so he cut off of route to go to the recycle facility. Headed to the recycle facility, he unloaded his vehicle, he returned to route, but he returned at the incorrect location. He didn't go back to where his last stop had ended, and consequently he left 20 stops on the west side of the street. So this is a coaching opportunity for Republic. The supervisor coached the driver, processes and procedures when leaving route, to mark clearly on your route sheet where you ended, just to make sure you begin where you left off, so we don't have issues like this. One other area that I'm addressing, because it was an ongoing issue, and I did have several council members contact me about it, was the Bell Creek neighborhood. We had quite a few recycle misses, and then we also had recycle carts blocking the driveway. Our route supervisors did go, and they actually were on route with the driver, observing the driver in cab and also from afar in their own supervisor vehicle. And so that's a coaching opportunity for this driver. A couple things happened. The driver was servicing containers, and then when he serviced them, he did leave them in a location that was blocking an entrance or exit to the alley. And that's how these residents access their homes. Understandably, that was an aggravation for the residents. And then also, many of the residents, I would say 90%, and I could be overstating it, but I know it's a pretty high portion of residents, they stage their carts at the end or entrance exit of the alleyway. So they stage their containers there, the driver services them all in a row, and then he carries on with his day. Well, I had 2 missed pickups call in from there, and what happened was there were 2 ladies, 2 women that lived at the end of that alley, and they did not bring their carts all the way down to be staged with everything else. So they put them out in front of their garage, which is an appropriate place to put them. There's nothing wrong with where they placed their carts, but the driver serviced everything that was staged, and then they neglected to drive up the alley to collect these 2 containers. So we coached through that process. Everything has been running smoothly, but most certainly wanted to address these because they've been repetitive, and then they've got the attention of staff and also council and mayor. Next slide, please. Part of the quality control that we put into place with our route supervisors is they conduct what we call it a RESOP, and essentially that's just an acronym for, it's a Republic Services, it's an observation program. That's where the supervisors, they will either ride along in cab with the driver, or they will follow behind the driver in their own vehicle. And then they're going to observe that driver and their actions. They're going to make note of safety protocol they're following or not following, customer experience. Are we putting the can back where we picked it up? Are we blocking a driveway? Did the can tip over after service, and did we get out of the truck to stand that container back up? And then also productivity. From the previous slide that you saw, our drivers, the men and women that drive our trucks, they are very busy. They're touching on average over 900 customers per day. And so then we're observing their productivity. And what this allows us to do is to have real-time coaching. So right there when it's happening, a supervisor can say, hey, that right turn you made, or this, or you went past the school playground, or this or that. That is really beneficial to provide real-time, as it happens, coaching as necessary. Route supervisors, they also will modify the route designs. With Commerce City growing as it does, there will come a time when these routes get too big and we're going to end up having to add another route because the drivers will get to a point where they will not be able to complete the number of homes they have on their stop. So that's something that we monitor the growth regularly, and then we balance the route design. So that is an ongoing process. And then the supervisor also addresses service failures and customer complaints. They close the loop directly with the customer. They coach the driver, on the reported error, and then they continue to monitor the driver performance to ensure quality control. Can we go to the next slide, please? Customer service. This is a really big topic. We take a lot of pride in the service we do on the street, but then also a lot of pride in the service we provide when residents contact us. So we ask that when a customer has an issue or an inquiry, that they contact Republic Services directly at the number listed 286-1200. When they contact us, in order for us to really get resolution efforts moving quickly, we need that customer's name, we need their address, contact phone number, service issue. Many times we're getting partial information, which makes it very difficult to reach out and contact the customer or to even have an address of where a service complaint is coming from. Generally, when a customer calls us, if they have a basic question or inquiry, that could be answered through our customer resource center. And so generally, those questions can be resolved. We do shoot for one call resolution, so if we can get there, that's great. If there is a service issue, something that we need to move a truck or get to someone's house, if we need to make a movement locally, then that is sent to Denver locally, our local hauling division, and that's sent to us for processing. And things like that would be a missed pickup. That needs to come to us because we're going to move a vehicle, a request for a bulk pickup, a delivery of an additional container, maybe removal or a swap out of a damaged container, additional cart request, things of that nature need to be sent to us, and then we handle that at a local level. And really having as much information from the resident as we can get, that really helps expedite a thorough and timely resolution. And so that's important. We have goals that we meet to satisfy what the customer is asking. And so having that information is crucial to getting it done quickly. Next slide, please. So Susan Roundy, this is our local point of contact. Susan and I, she works for me and she's on my municipal government contract team. She is our local point of contact for Commerce City. So she manages the entire flow of customer service requests at the local level. Once it goes to the call center, if it's not resolved or it's an action we need to do locally, that will flow through Susan. All service issue resolution requests, again, I'm repeating, it goes through Susan. She collaborates with our operations and dispatch to ensure we're having resolution. She will close the loop with the customer. That's why the contact phone information is so important, so we can close that loop. And then all escalations. If something comes to us that's not resolved timely, if it's not resolved to the customer satisfaction, if it escalates to the city, all of those escalations will go through our local leadership, which would be myself, Manny Gomez, which is our general manager, and then also Manny Cardenas, who is our ops manager for residential. So those escalations will go through us, and then a resolution will be communicated to the customer as well as Commerce City staff to ensure that resolution has been completed. Sometimes, oh, next slide, please. Sorry, Dylan. There are times when customers do not call Republic. They won't call us directly, or they won't call the call center. They go straight to Commerce City, which is fine. There is a process for that we have in place with city staff. If they contact the city, a customer relationship management document is created with that issue, and the contact information, service address, what the issue is, all that information is sent to directly to Susan Roundy. The customer is contacted to confirm the service needs, and the reason we do that is sometimes we'll get a customer that calls and says, you missed my recycling. And that will go through a CRM process. It gets sent to us. And then we do a little bit of research and we realize that this is not that customer service week. And so we'll reach out to the customer and just go through that process, that what the recycle week is or is not. When we contact a customer, it very well may be that there's been a missed pickup that we need to get handled, or whatever the other issue is. So we get what the service needs are. Again, Susan spearheads that, and she handles that entire process. The request is sent to operations, and then Susan will close the loop directly with the customer, and then she will also email city staff to let them know a resolution confirmation so they can document that on their end. Next slide. And another part of the customer service process is the new home starts. The city sends a daily list of homes that have their COs and residents have moved in. Those, again, are sent directly to Susan. They do not go through the call center. That new home data is entered into our system, and so that our operations team can get that address and get it routed to the correct service day and the correct recycling schedule. Susan then sends a welcome letter that we send to every new resident in Commerce City, whether they're in a new home or if it's a resale. They get a resident welcome letter, and then they also get a calendar mailed to that customer, or via email if they prefer it electronic. And the reason we do that is when we started the program, we sent out a calendar which is day specific and recycle week specific by address. And so there's not just one calendar that suits the entire city. We do have day specific and recycle week specific. So we need to make sure that we control that process and we get the right information to the customer. Susan will then return that information, that new start form, to the city. She'll confirm with the city when the cart deliveries will happen, and then when that service date will start, and also the day of service for that particular customer. Next slide, please. I wanted to touch a little bit on the customer responsibilities. Most certainly, we have had some errors on route, and that's a coaching opportunity for Republic and our drivers. But we do want to make sure that residents are doing the right thing, because that makes sure that they're getting the service that they believe they're entitled to. And that does cut down on the call volume we take and missed pickup calls that are coming in where something may be a customer error. Again, to reiterate, to have your cart at the curb by 7 a.m., we do recommend you do it the night before. So many people, they try to listen for the trash truck to see if they can hear them and then run outside to put their cart out. You know, and we do go back if someone calls and says, hey, I didn't have it out on time. But you saw from the productivity requirements we have on our men and women in those trucks, that really slows them down to have to go back. So please have the things out by 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. We do ask that the carts are spaced 2 feet apart. And I do get calls, people asking, why does that matter? When a driver pulls up, if you've ever watched them do their service, they have an automated arm, and having a 2-foot gap allows them to get that arm in between the two carts and grab it and service it and set it back down without tipping over another cart. It just provides a little ease of service for our drivers so they can do their work and carry on. We also ask that the carts are 6 feet away from parked cars, from mailboxes, or any other object that we most certainly would not want to hit or damage. We ask people to verify their service calendar and recycle week. We do field a lot of calls with people that are concerned that they were missed on recycle, but they're on the wrong week. And really what happens is we have one person in a neighborhood that puts their stuff out on the wrong week, and everybody else is like, well, they must know something that I don't know, so they must be smart. I'm just gonna do what they're doing. Next thing you know, I have an entire street of carts that are out on the wrong week, and then we have to reach out to those residents and provide a little education, and then also phone the city and communicate with staff, because chances are they're receiving missed pickup complaints as well. This is the next bullet problem that we saw much more readily in January and February, but we still have this issue. As a matter of fact, today I had a call with city staff. We went over the first week statistics for August, and we had 8 customers in this first week of service that are still using either Waste Management or Waste Connection carts. We do not collect competitor carts or personal carts or extra bags outside. Consequently, residents, when we service the Republic container and not the additional container that is not a Republic and paid for container, we do get complaint calls. So it's most certainly not as readily as abundant as we saw in January and February, but in the first week of August, we still had 8 documented Waste Management carts that are out for collection by our drivers. So that, you're pushing 40 or 50 in a month, which is still sizable. We do ask that residents call in advance to schedule bulk removals. Sometimes we have residents that just put bulk items out and think if they put it out, well, it will be collected. And that's not how the process works. They do need to schedule that. We service Commerce City residents in automated side load trucks. We need to collect bulk items in a rear load truck. It's a completely different vehicle. And so we need to schedule that to get the correct vehicle to that resident to collect the bulk. Also, I have complaints come in periodically for containers that are half empty. As you can imagine, it's a safety issue. Drivers do not reach in to stir up loose trash on the bottom of a container. They could get stuck with a needle or cut by a sharp object. So it's something that we don't do. It's a safety issue. So we do ask the residents to please bag their trash. When you put wet waste or grass clippings and things without it being bagged, it is going to stick to the bottom. It's going to smell terrible, and it's going to cause residents to call and have an issue. So that is a helpful hint that we like residents to do. It helps everything run smoothly and make sure their containers are emptied completely. So right now, I'd like to turn it over to Joe that's going to go through some next steps. And then, of course, myself and my team are available for any and all questions you may have of us.
Thanks, Mark. And thank you, Dylan, for transferring to the next slide. So through this process that we've been working through with Republic Services, Mark and his team, we've identified some opportunities to hopefully improve the level of service, as well as more quickly and accurately identify deficiencies and correct them as appropriate and in the fastest way possible. First, which we've already started, we're increasing the frequency of the meetings from a monthly to weekly basis. And that's providing us an opportunity to be more proactive in reviewing the performance standards, metrics, complaints, questions, and comments. As Mark had mentioned, the quote unquote F2 report has a lot of useful data, and I think it can be really used to our advantage if we slice and dice it appropriately. So as the second bullet indicates, we're going to, and we're in the middle of the process of modifying the data and collection efforts so that we can more quickly and precisely identify the service level deficiencies, For example, sorting missed pickups and complaint data by route, day, and driver will allow us to more accurately and precisely identify the issues that we're having, where we're having them, when we're having them, and more precisely identify a improvement or a solution that's very specific to the issue that we're having versus trying to globally provide solutions that may or may not be accurately and timely affecting the customer. Next slide, Dylan. Thanks. And then with the information that Mark had presented, as well as the data we're collecting, we're getting much more useful information that we can use with respect to our communication website and social media platforms to provide timely and accurate recurring communications that are more tailored specifically to the needs of the customer and the issues that we're having. For example, I think historically we've provided on a recurring basis, just because of the time of year, certain types of reports or information to our customers, as opposed to analyzing the contact and inquiry reports to more accurately and specifically be able to respond to our current customer needs and the issues that they're having. And lastly, with respect to our positions in our operations division within Public Works, we have an open coordinator position. And one of the responsibilities of that coordinator position is to oversee the trash and recycling program. So we're in the process of recruiting and filling that position, and that person can provide even more dedicated time to amply administer the refuse collection contract and more directly monitor the level of service and customer resolutions that we're having. We had, with respect to COVID-19 and some of the financial issues with respect to our revenue generation, that position had been filled right before we entered into the COVID-19 situation, but with that position was then open, and we weren't able to fill that during the last 3 months, and now we're in the process of filling that position. So those are several of the next steps that we're pursuing in order to enhance and improve the current level of service that the Republic Service team is providing for the trash and recycling program. And that concludes the formal part of our presentation. And Mark, Manny, Jennifer, and I would be most happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
Anyone on council have questions for Republic Services or staff? Councilwoman Allen Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Mark, for your presentation and the other staff. Just curious, few questions. You mentioned, well, I'm curious right now, today, are we going through a transition? Because I know if I understood you correctly, did you say sometimes that's when missing pickup days may occur?
We're not going through any transition right now. So no, I mean, the drivers are dedicated drivers. We had one driver that is going through some additional training in the reunion area where we had some continued misses, but unless I'm missing something, if I have a team member that wants to chime in, but to my knowledge, we are not in any kind of transition.
Okay.
No, you're right, Mark.
Okay, great. Okay, because just a big concern I've had, and they're still sitting out there, but like I said, I've lived in the same house my entire life. I have on my Ring doorbell today where Republic Trash was supposed to pick up our trash, and my trash cans are still sitting out there. My constituents and other residents' trash cans are still sitting out there. It's past 7:00 p.m. So this is a concern because they're contacting me as to, okay, our trash cans are still sitting out there. So it's after hours. Just curious. So at this point, do we, they've been contacting me, texting me. Do I tell them to sit the trash can in and then we'll call tomorrow, or does each of us have to call? This is a concern. And then what I don't understand, the route plans do seriously need to be considered, because I'm on a corner street, but yet I seen like I said, the trash truck go by my home, several residents' home. It's on my Ring doorbell 3 times. But and yes, we had a police officer occurrence where some of the streets were barricaded, but the trash truck went by my home several times. So that's another question. Okay, so it's past 10:00 now. Our trash cans are still sitting outside. then we get into the concern about rodents, that type of stuff in my ward. So what is the protocol and what should I tell my residents?
Well, the first of all, I'm sorry if your containers are still sitting full and not empty. And the first thing I would say is for those residents to contact Republic first, so we can get to a resolution of whatever the situation may be. If you want to, after this meeting, email me your physical address. I don't need all of your neighbors. If you give me your address, I'll make sure I get that information to Jenny and my operations team. And then we will look at that first thing in the morning to figure out what went on. Did you say it was barricaded and blocked today? Did that happen today?
Yes, well, from the Commerce City Police activity, but that occurred way after the time when we saw the trash man pass down our street, which was 11 something. So we just, we're concerned. The previous company that we had, even though I'm on a corner street, they seem to have a route, but there's just serious concerns. But for tonight, like you said, do I tell my residents and my neighbors to put the trash can in, and then do we have to wait to call each one of us to call you and then sit them back out? Because then, like I said, we have a big skunk and raccoon concern too. So how do we handle that?
I would say at this point, I would leave the containers out and you send me your address, and then I have my operations team on the call tonight, and then we will get there first thing in the morning. If we were blocked, I'm not sure. I don't know your address off the top of my head, so I can't speak specifically to it. But what I can say is for residents to contact you, that's just fine, but please contact us first and let us know there's a problem. We're in Commerce City every day. Our hauling division is located in Commerce City, right off of 74th. So if we know of an issue, we can address it quickly.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and I would add to that. So you mentioned that you had seen and had some concerns earlier today on your camera. We don't mind worry calls. In other words, if you're concerned that somehow there's either been blockage or a truck has come by and they've skipped you or they've missed you, maybe we're an hour late, it's okay to give us a call. That'll alert us. And most times, in fact, almost always, if we hear before, even 4 o'clock from you, we can get it same day.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so if it's after 7, then we wait till the next business day?
Yeah, after 7, don't wait. Yeah, don't ever wait to call, but we won't have a truck out there until the very next morning.
Okay. Yes, and see, that's the other thing. There's no consistency because a lot of us, we never know what time the truck is going to come, and everyone's even started placing their trash can out at night the night before. So that's the thing. We used to could kind of predict and tell when our trash service was going to be done, and now it can be even, like you said, as late as 6 at night. But I will contact, like I said, some staff tomorrow, and I hope this situation improves. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for letting us know. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Councilwoman Noble.
Thanks very much. And thank you, Mr. Wilson, for putting together these proactive next steps. That's very, very useful also. So we appreciate that. And thank you, Mr. Petrovich, for your presentation. That was very good. Following up on Councilmember Alan Thomas's comment, there is a problem when we're talking about trash pickup and then you're closed and there's a miss and you're closed over the weekend. That's an issue. There is an issue like on July 3rd, customer service was closed. That was a Friday, but I guess it had to do with the July 4th holiday. But if you're picking up trash, then it would seem that the best thing to do is to have customer service open on days you're picking up trash. Also, along those same lines, when you say you have an on time, is that on time between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m.? Or is that an on time that we're not necessarily aware of?
That is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Generally, the routes the drivers run are the same routes. So if everything runs as normal, they will be to that house generally around the same time every week they pick up. Now, if a driver comes in and the truck's got a flat tire or it had a mechanical issue or some sort of issue that delayed them leaving our shop, then they would be running later than normal. So we track our on-time pickup as we collected the day that it was supposed to be collected, between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m.
Okay, and I know that, at least I understand, the city of Arvada has chosen Republic as their single hauler after having had 9 haulers in that city.
Correct.
And this isn't my last question. I have one other, but I'm wondering about how do you scale up your services that means lots more trucks and people working without other customers suffering?
Correct. So that process, Councilmember Noble, we go through an entire pro forma process before we prepare a proposal to the RFP that was put out by Arvada. And that whole pro forma process has all the expenses, what it costs us to get that program up and running, meaning we need to buy, and I'm going off of memory, but I believe it's 13, maybe 14 collection vehicles we need to purchase. We need to hire drivers. This particular instance, the city is purchasing the trash carts on their own through a grant process. So that's something we generally do. We did that with Commerce City, but in this instance, they're going to be purchasing their own carts. And then we have to hire drivers, customer service, we have to hire operation staff. So all of those team members come on board. Now, when we bring people on board, just like Commerce City, we don't hire 6 new drivers and then those new untenured drivers go into Commerce City. That's not how it happens. What happens is our tenured drivers, they vie for these routes. They like to have these city contract routes. And so we get the tenured drivers that are competing to be on these routes. The new drivers come in and they're being educated. They're going through our 7-week training program. Whether they have worked for Waste Management or they're brand new to the industry, it doesn't matter. They still go through our training process. And then those drivers are put on our subscription routes, which are much smaller. And it's more of a, I don't want to say a training route because that simplifies it, but that's how the process works. So the new drivers that we will hire for Arvada, we will have tenured drivers vying for that, and then we'll bring in all the other staff. And so there'll be no impact to Commerce City or any of our other 8 city partners, nor will there be an impact to our subscription customer base as well.
Okay, that's good. We'll hold you to that.
Yes.
All right, thank you. And then my last one, sort of just as Jennifer's was, you know, when you start seeing a lot of complaints show up on Nextdoor and Facebook and that kind of thing, and you're trying to help people as best you can. And I do agree that I'm sure it's best to reach out to you all first, so that there's no one acting as an intermediary. Let's get this show on the road and get it fixed, and hopefully in a timely manner, so it's not after 4 o'clock and anyone has to wait, or worse, with the weekend rolling over. But my husband had to call in July because when we came home, there was glass broken in the gutter and out into the street, and also a foreign liquid. This was after our recycling was picked up. We didn't recognize some of the glass, which was that was really odd. And then I actually wash out all of our recycling stuff. So the liquid didn't belong to us either. So we had no idea what the liquid was. We weren't able to get through because it was one of those days when your customer service is closed. Then when he was able to reach customer service, he asked for a supervisor. and we never did hear from anyone.
Okay.
We did think that it was the responsibility of the company to clean up the roadway, clean up the broken glass and stuff before it did any damage. We did do the cleanup ourselves, but I'm only one little instance, of course. And if you're reporting 100% resolution on your slide, we weren't part of that 100% in July.
Right.
That wasn't resolved.
Okay.
So I just want to make that point. And also for other people who've had to wait maybe a week or two for their things to get picked up. We've heard that as well.
Okay.
I really, trash is one of those things that is really, really important to people. And they set their clocks around it. To have to leave it out between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. without anything more certain than that is very complicated for people. But I do hope that we can make this work. You're just in your first year, and this is a 5-year contract. So let's do all we can together to make this partnership successful.
Absolutely agree. Thank you for the comments. Appreciate it.
Yes, and if I may just add on, Councilmember Alan Thomas and Councilmember Noble, I greatly appreciate your comments. This is very helpful background information, and I will just reiterate a comment that I think Mark had alluded to earlier, as well as I. We have a lot, I'll use the term data, that we collect, but at present, we haven't turned that data into useful information to more effectively and timely and hopefully proactively engage the customer and attack these problems. And Mark and his team is working with our staff to do that, to take that data and turn it into useful information that we can, one, not only better inform the customer as to how they can help Republic do their job, but for us to get in front of a lot of these issues and finding better ways to dice and slice that information, as well as increasing the frequency of our meetings with them. I fully expect and anticipate that these situations that occur on occasion will be brought down to an absolute minimum.
Thank you. Councilwoman Grimes.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have any additional questions. I think Ms. Noble and Ms. Allen Thomas covered everything on my mind, but I just wanted to say thank you to you and your team, Mr. Petrovich, for coming and presenting tonight. I had raised a number of the same issues as Ms. Noble in the last couple of months, and certainly appreciate seeing the data suggesting that missed pickups are going down and that there is a process to alleviate some of those issues. So thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.
Hey, any other comments or questions for Republic or staff concerning the Republic Services contract? Well, thank you all for being here. I know it's late for you guys, but I appreciate you being here to brief us on all this. Very informative slide presentation that you gave, and I hope that anybody watching knows the proper way to carry out resolution for missed pickups. That being said, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is council reports. First up is Interim City Manager Tinklenberg. Maybe we'll get that script changed before the next meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. A lot of good information tonight. I won't delay you longer by giving much of a report. Just refer you to the city manager update for this past week. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next on the list is Mr. Sheasley.
Nothing to add this evening. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other council members wishing to make reports? Seeing none, I'll make a brief one. As I mentioned last week prior to the meeting taking, Councilwoman Noble.
Could someone explain how we arrive at agendas for study sessions? These are all very critical, important topics that we have been talking about and getting presentations on this evening. Really valuable. So don't get me wrong here. But I'm wondering, in terms of time management, how we figure out that certain study sessions can't be at another time, or perhaps the trash explanation couldn't actually be at a council meeting when residents might be watching, that kind of thing.
Well, it's a process that, number one, what are the topics that city council members ask for? That determines our working list. And then we try to schedule no more than generally 4 presentations in an evening, just because of time management. Unfortunately, this evening was co-opted by the Urban Renewal Authority meeting, having to, it wasn't ready last week when we anticipated it would be ready. And as a result, we had to push the actual action till tonight. And so that also involved a special city council meeting. So we lost time right there. But otherwise, normally 4 topics can fit in an evening. Now, the other thing that's coming up are the budget meetings. And so, again, that eats into what's available in terms of study sessions that are available for these types of presentations. So try to fit in, as best we can and what seems to be timely, but we're always open to input from council on, what you want to see when.
Who is the we?
Excuse me, executive management, basically a leadership team, so department directors and I and city attorney's office, we all put our heads together to try to figure out what can go when. And it partly depends on staff schedule too, in terms of when they're able to get a presentation ready for you.
I hope that maybe you can involve the mayor or a council person in these decisions also. And then people who, I don't have work tomorrow, so it's not an issue for me, but there's plenty of people who do have work tomorrow. And I think it would be helpful if we can spread some of these out, particularly when they are big topics, not just cursory topics. That's just my thought on it.
Okay, thank you. I would refer you to the council schedule, work schedule. That's attached to the city manager update each week. And at the bottom of that, number one, it lays out what the topics are for the next several months. But at the bottom, there's a parking lot that are issues that have been raised, and due to cancellation of meetings during the COVID outbreak, a bunch of presentations went into that parking lot. And so those are the ones that are hanging out there that we're trying to incorporate in as the schedule allows as well. So at any point, again, we welcome your input and direction. So.
How does that happen? Then
I don't understand. At each of the council meetings, if, for example, you want a presentation on parking, for example, that came up some time back. And so originally it was scheduled for April 13. And again, because of, for a while there, we had no study sessions. So it didn't happen. Now, we've been talking about, okay, when can we get that pulled together and put back on a schedule for council? But again, it came from council in terms of wanting a presentation regarding that. Now, for tonight, for example, there were several requests from council members for presentation regarding the trash pickup. And so that was the reason for it coming up tonight. The CDPHE presentation regarding air monitoring, they contacted staff and wanted permission to set up in several locations in the city. And we felt that it would not be wise to do that without involving council at least, to advise you that they want to do that and make sure that you have no objections to that. So again, we're trying to keep them as timely as possible, but again, they're driven by either, external need or direction from council in terms of requesting a session.
I won't belabor this and keep people up any longer than they already have been. I apologize, but I really do think we need to look at this more closely. Thank you very much.
Any other council members wishing to make a report? Seeing none, as I said last week prior to the meeting happening, I had a Zoom meeting with a attorney representing the Metro District that wants to form on the west side of Highway 85 at 112th Avenue to discuss my concerns with Metro District. The city attorney joined me on that meeting while we had that conversation. Friday evening, I was invited by Mark Bush in order to sit down and talk about their plans for 120th Avenue, looked over their plans, and think they'll be coming to council or staff soon to present their plans, as well as where we need to go in the future for that project. That's all I have. You guys have a good evening. Have a good week. God bless. See you next week.